Are we ready? Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Sorry we had a closed session, running a little bit late tonight. I'd like to begin this meeting of July 8th, 2013 City Council Successor Agency to the Redevelopment Agency of the City of San Carlos with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item on the agenda is changes to the order of the agenda. Mr. Malpe, any changes?
No changes this evening, Mr. Mayor,
Anyone
but I would like
to make any changes? Hearing none. Excuse me.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out for benefit of the public and the council that we do have two items on the agenda tonight that will have council members who need to recuse themselves.
When we get to that point, we'll announce ourselves. Thank you. Item number 3, report from closed session. Mr. Rubens.
There's no reportable items from the closed session.
Okay, number 4, council communications and announcements. Mr. Grocott.
Yes, the only thing I wanted to report on, I didn't attend any particular meetings or anything, but I did have a situation, I think some folks may have read about it in the newspaper this morning, actually, where I was downtown one morning and noticed that there were big numbers being painted on the parking stalls, and so I rushed over here to City Hall to find out what that was about, and staff kindly called the contractor and stopped those numbers from being painted, and then the ones they put down they took up. And I've been told that item specifically will be coming back to council for further review. But I also wanted to bring it up under this interest, and that is when what I call the hockey pucks went in, it was a similar situation, and I had brought that up to council and to staff, and said that at the time that when we get grant money, because this whole project apparently is paid for with grant money, that we look at that policy, that when grant money comes to us, it doesn't just necessarily get spent, or when a grant money offer comes to us, that it just doesn't get spent without coming to council. Similar to where we have a threshold for money spent on anything out of the budget, it comes to council to give us a chance to look at it, because when grant money is available to us, especially in large dollar amounts, it could affect policy, and in this case that seems to be what's happening, is there's this money that's being spent and it can affect policy. So I'd like that to come to council, that issue of how grant money that's available to us gets spent, does it come to council or not, and that we look at that as an issue. We talked about that before. I thought there was a consent from the council to go in that direction, but I've never seen anything come before the council. So, all right. Just a reminder.
City manager, noted.
Okay. It's noted, and typically we do have grants come to council for their acceptance when we have grants. This is a little bit different situation in that it's a pilot project, so we're not receiving grant money and then turning around and using it to purchase services or put anything in. The offer was basically to serve as a pilot project for this vendor, Parker, in terms of having an online application so that people could use their phone to see if there were free spaces available in downtown. But to your point, message has been received, and in the future, those items will be brought to the City Council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grocott. Ms. Clapper?
Yes. On June 28th, I attended a lunch where there were BizSmart Awards, BizSmart at Work Awards that were being distributed, and there were 3 of them that were for businesses in the city of San Carlos. One of them being Bird's Nest and the ice cream place with the surfboards. Cowabunga, yes, Cowabunga. And the last one that I personally picked up the award for was one that was given to the Friends of the San Carlos Library, the City of San Carlos, and the San Mateo County Library in recognition of the recycling and reuse that was done by the Friends of the Library last year in accepting donations of books and appropriately either finding new homes for them or having them recycled. And so There's an award made out of recycled glass, of course, that is now in Mr. Maltby's office, and we received a certificate of recognition from Kevin Mullen. So it was my pleasure to be there and see all the organizations that have really dedicated themselves to either composting or recycling. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Collins?
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to report other than I did take a field trip to Hawaii intending to go to a city council meeting, but sort of got sidetracked.
Thank you for sharing. Mr. Olbert?
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor, but Mr. Collins, next time when you're going there, if you need a bag man, let me know.
I'll keep that in mind.
A couple of items I have tonight. I read in the paper, and I'm sure other folks did, or at least on the patch, that the girls softball team is very successful in this city. San Carlos Force 10C softball team is qualified for the 2013 Cal State Games in San Diego. And I guess that those games are coming up the 11th through the 14th of this month. And one of the reasons I mention that is congratulate the young women on their achievement so far, and hopefully wish them good luck in San Diego at the state games. And also to indicate that they have a website set up, because obviously it's not free for them to drive down there or fly down there or put themselves up, so they're obviously looking for folks to help them. And the website would be scforce.mydagsite.com. So San Carlos Force 10, see, good luck and go get them. The other item I'd like to bring up is that I guess tomorrow is our assistant city manager's last day. And Mr. Mora, how many years? 26 and a half years here at this city. I mention this because this will be his last meeting, and we will not be meeting for a few weeks. And so I wanted to make sure that the public was aware of all the things that Mr. Mora has done. I could go on for about an hour with all the jobs and the positions. It's sort of like I think you've played every position, but I'm not sure that there isn't a position you haven't played. As some of the baseball covers all nine positions, I think you've covered more than 9.
Yeah, I've had more than a few hats there. You're right.
Exactly. And so at various times, depending on when there were openings in the city. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure for myself, I speak for the council, and I'm sure other people may speak other times on it. But for myself and for the folks in this city, I have to congratulate you and thank you very, very much for the contributions that you made over the entire over 26 and a half years that you've been here. I mean, that's got to be pretty close to a record, isn't it, for even an employee almost? Although I guess there have been some over that possibly. But you must be in the top 5, if not the top 10.
Yeah, I think there are a couple police folks that have beat me, but
excluding
yeah, it's up
public
there.
safety and fire and police, I would imagine that you pretty well top out the list. So anyway, the point is, I just want to make sure that you're recognized in a public forum, to the folks here, to the folks watching at home, and to for the minutes to reflect that we really appreciate your time and all the work that you put in for the betterment of the city of San Carlos. So thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe later on you can do that. So let's go on to next item, because we have a lot of people here. Number 5, council appointments and presentations. Appointment of a San Carlos representative and alternate from the City Council to the SBWMA Board of Directors. Should an amendment pass that changes the board governance to elected officials rather than city managers and department heads. The SBWMA, just for folks out there, king of the acronyms here, relates to our garbage. We're on a 12-member joint powers group with 11 other cities, actually 10 other cities and the county, to be specific. And right now, the board of directors of that group is made up of staff members, and we're in the midst of possibly changing that to electeds. So I would entertain from my colleagues folks that might want to volunteer or other items of discussion on that item.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would like to nominate Mark Olbert to be our representative, should we need a city representative to the SBWMA board.
All right, does that need a second, Mr. Rubens?
Nominations don't need a second.
All right. All right. So, Mr. Olbert, is anyone else wishing to have that position? Or any other nominations? If not, then we take a vote on that. All right. Ms. Mew, Crystal, would you do that, please? Roll call.
Councilmember Clapper?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, I guess, that you wanted to do it, so you said yes, so I go yes. And we need an alternate, too, so.
I'll take it.
Mr. Grocott, all right.
I'd be interested in that.
All right.
So if
Mr. Grocott has volunteered.
nominate myself or
Nominate
volunteer
himself or whatever. So any other interest? All right, Ms. Mew?
Councilmember Clapper?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right, thank you. And again, this is all predicated on the fact that 8 of the 12 jurisdictions passed the amendment. All right, the next item on our agenda is public comment. This is for persons wishing to address the City Council on matters not on the posted agenda. We try to keep this to a couple of minutes each. I have 2 speaker cards. The first one is Andre Carpio. Mr. Carpio?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is André Carpio. I have come here to state my grievance for the last 10 years about the theft of my solar car. And at the last meeting, I did explain to you the legitimacy of my ownership, not only of the solar car, but as a manufacturer, because I own the patent that are in the solar car. And I give you a demonstration how a patent works from the original idea to the art history, then the prototype, then finally to the product to be installed on a machine. I also pointed the difference between a practical patent, a patent that goes or would be going into several vehicles, like in the assembly line, and those who are only specifically for one vehicle, like a safety device, like to remove quickly a body from the chassis in case of an accident or a fire. And my difficulty has been here mainly in my grievance that has not been solved because I am faced with, as an individual, as an engineer, as an inventor, I'm facing with an audience that is neither one of them. You're not an engineer, you're not. Par City Council are not engineer. The police that took care of the report, they're not engineers, they don't know what's going on. They have no concept of product liability. They have no concept about responsibility of a product when it fails. And I could name several instances, and the closest one here is the San Carlo fire, where everybody blamed defect on the pipeline. Admitting that this is true, there is other reason for, and that is that you all live, like the police, in a culture of immunity. There is nothing that I can do to force you. And if I go to court, the court, of course, will sway in your favor. First, the reason is because you can afford the price of an attorney, in which I cannot. And in this fashion, like the old scripture, how much justice can you afford? And in my case, it's very little. So I'm repeating, I need my solar car, and you have a responsibility to get it for me. From what I understand, it's in North Carolina, and it's your problem to get it. I'll give you a letter, a 2-page letter, which explain a little bit the philosophy of culture of immunity, and you should understand my grievance from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpio. The next speaker card I have is William Warhurst.
Good evening. I came to express my concerns about what I think are going to be serious traffic and parking problems when the Salt Box restaurant opens. That's located at Laurel and St. Francis. This was before the Planning Commission 14 months ago. There was discussion then about how the Saltbuck Restaurant has seating for 65, staff of 10. They've added only a net of 6 parking spaces because by curb cuts they were allowed to take away 2 of the public spaces. There was discussion then that there would be need for planning in that area because there isn't any parking lots. I know the city is looking into what can be done to improve the parking situation in the downtown area. We need also that kind of attention given to the, if it isn't already, and I'm just not aware of it, but to the area down where these restaurants are going in. The Amazing Walk has been allowed to expand. We have, of course, the office that has taken up a lot of the parking around there. We also have the traffic issue. In fact, Councilperson Clapper was on the Planning Commission at the time. She commented on traffic safety issues because out of the Saltbuck, they're turning out of the alley. It's a very blind, difficult left turn for people, and also on Walnut coming onto St. Francis, the same issue for those traffic, and there was discussion, need of traffic surveys and some kind of advanced planning so that we're ahead of the curve a little bit, and it's now probably 3 months to opening, and I'm hoping to find out if there's something the city has in the works, that they've got a planning traffic study, or that they could do one, or have some contingency plans, because this is going to be a big impact on the neighborhood. And I was hoping to find out more information about that, or some direction. Or
Okay, Mr. City Manager, could you check with Public Works, and if there's anything, or if there isn't, whatever, to get a hold of Mr. Warhurst, someone from staff, get a hold of Mr. Warhurst?
Sure. Do we have your contact information?
I've called is it Doris, who's handling.
Well, maybe you can just write it on a piece of paper and just give it to
on
Mr.
this card
Maltby.
also. Yes. I would.
Okay, great. And we can go from there. Thank you, Mr. Warhurst.
We'll get a hold of you. Thank you.
We've got it here, too. All right. Anyone else on public comment for items not on the posted agenda? All right. Next item we have is consent calendar. Consent calendar items are usually considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. Is there anyone from the council that wishes to remove anything from item 7? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. And we have to read the resolutions on these, Mr.
No, you do not.
Ordinances.
Okay, there's no ordinances, just so the R's are just for our edification. All right. Is there a motion?
Yes, I move that we approve the consent calendar items A through L.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. A roll call, please.
Councilmember Clapper?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott? Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right, moving on. Item 8, new business. And before you start, Mr. Walter, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. This, as the city manager alluded to earlier, this is an item that I am legally recused from because I am within 500 feet of the park. I also wanted to mention, and I think I can do this, and stop me if I can't, that I received dozens and dozens of emails, and I quite honestly did not respond to them, just to be absolutely sure that I wouldn't have any comment one way or the other on these. So if you did send me an email and you didn't get a response, it's not because I didn't read it or not because I didn't want to, but I felt that I just should be extremely cautious in this item. Mr. Olbert will be running the meeting on this item, and again, I will be outside. I have requested, or the city attorney requested I leave the chamber completely. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands why I'm leaving. Okay? Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Enjoy your respite. Mr. Walter, take it away.
Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the City Council, Jay Walter, Public Works Director, here to lead off the presentation for this particular item. In the audience, we also have Christine Boland, our new Parks and Recreation Director, who will be assisting as questions may arise from the Council or the public, and David Rubin from Calendar Associates, who is our lead consultant on this project. I'll start off the presentation and I'll hand it over to Dave, and then I'll wrap it up at the end, and then we'd be happy to take your questions, or at any point in time, please interrupt. So tonight we're going to be talking to the council again about the project background and chronology so far. As you're aware, it has been a number of months since we've been out to the public and had a number of public meetings and had opportunities for folks to provide their input on the various concepts that we have for the park. We have summarized that input that we've received to date, and it is part of your council staff report from the 2 community meetings with all the comments that we received. We're going to be presenting the concepts to you tonight. We'll start off with the original 2 concepts, and we'll work our way through to the concepts that we presented finally to the Parks and Recreation Commission just a few weeks ago and had their recommendation to come forward with. We will recap some of the commentary and the discussion that took place at the community meetings as well as the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, and then we'll finish up with a staff recommendation and what are the next steps for us in this project. So again, a little bit of the background and the chronology. We hired Callender & Associates end of last calendar year to help us develop the concepts and the park improvements for this Crestview Park Improvement Project. We held a community meeting. The first one was on March 5th, where we introduced concepts A and B. We then, within a week, we had a special meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission to hear the summary of the community meeting that we had and get their feedback on the concepts as well. We went back out again, and in the meantime, had many emails and other communications as it related to people's preferences for the improvements in the park and what we should be considering, and had that second community meeting where we presented revised concepts C and D. So taking that community input and working to incorporate that into what we think would be workable concepts that we could move forward into a design with. And then finally, at the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting on June 5th, we went with the intent of asking the Commission to give us their recommendation on one of those concepts and to also weigh in on the subject of converting the turf from the natural turf that exists there now to artificial turf, which had been one of the original project concepts or scopes as part of the project that was approved in the 2012-14 Capital Improvement Program. And then tonight we're here because we're ready to begin the process of developing the plans and specifications for making the park improvements. And so what we want is for the council to essentially weigh in on the concept, give us any feedback, and then we would like to be on our way proceeding towards getting our park improvements implemented. So at this point, I'll ask David Rubin to come up and continue the presentation.
Good evening, members of council, Honorable Vice Mayor. Jay's provided you with a little bit of background. I just wanted to take this opportunity to walk you through some of the concepts in a little bit more detail and provide some background to show you, illustrate how we got to where we are today. Concept A, let me take a step back. The original request for proposals that came out included 5 core project components, and those were conversion of natural turf field to synthetic turf. That was improvement in the parking lot circulation. That was improvements to the play area and upgrading that and making that accessible. The hard court and doing a resurfacing as well as looking at the utilization of that space, as well as a perimeter running track. So those were the 5 core elements that we started with. And so with that in mind, we made our first pass at preparing concepts A and B. So each of these concepts actually have a lot of similarities, but what I want to do is call out some of the key components and flag what's a little bit different between them. With concept A, it's a synthetic turf field that's got a synthetic or a rubber running track around its perimeter. It has a turnaround and drop-off that has been added essentially to the existing footprint of the parking lot that's out there now. So there would still be 15 spaces and a turnaround and drop-off. Of course, as I mentioned, each of the concepts has play area improvements, a group picnic area, and then we've shown a half basketball court with a color overlay. Concept B, very similar arrangement, a few things that are different. in particular. Again, a synthetic turf field. In this case, we had proposed a synthetic turf running track as the perimeter track. The parking lot is configured differently in Concept B, where the turnaround and drop-off is at the entrance with parking bays flanking either side. And again, showing group picnic, playground improvements, as well as a half basketball court. So those were all presented at the public meeting on March 5th. The slides that follow, we've summarized the comments that we heard essentially by category. We heard lots of different comments. So starting with the turf and synthetic turf, natural turf, some of the things that we heard were things about synthetic turf just simply not being in character with the site and its natural setting, and that it would change the use of the park. Someone that wants to throw a towel on the lawn and just catch some sun, maybe it's not the best use for that. Environmental concerns, this had mainly to do with heat concerns, material composition. Some just felt it wasn't justified on an economic basis, just didn't think it would pencil out to spend so much for this field to be upgraded. And then on the flip side, we also heard from athletic user groups that this actually would be a more consistent, safer playing surface and would provide for more use, reducing downtime that the field experiences now. Play area comments, we heard that the play area needs to really address all ages and challenge all the way from tot up to preteen and maybe even beyond. We heard pretty loud and clear, keep the swings. And we also heard that where you can, expand the play area. Take advantage of this opportunity to make this really special and do something exciting and dynamic. Parking, so here what we heard was, don't sacrifice park space for parking. That was a very consistent theme. And related to that, don't impact neighbors, especially as we'd shown in Concept B, there was some expanded parking to the south, and there was some concern that there would be headlights shining into homes that don't experience that now. In Concept B, we had 19 spaces, and there's 15 spaces out there today, so it was a gain of 4. There was some concern that the number of spaces added just didn't justify doing it, period. And many neighbors were okay with on-street parking and having people park in front of their homes and walk into the park. So what we heard was that we really don't need to expand parking. So trying to take that to heart when we came back with Concept C and D. Perimeter track comments, we know that this is a very heavily used track. It's near and dear to many park users that use it every day. We also heard to consider that track adjacency to the field and potential conflicts between using the track and game day. And in many cases, most people said that some kind of improvement to the surface is desirable, whether it's in a DG or in rubber or synthetic material. Hardcourt area, as you all know, this is a very hilly neighborhood, and we showed smaller hardcourt area in Concepts A and B. Was not received well. And the reason for that is what we learned is that this is really one of the few areas in the neighborhood where kids can learn to ride their bikes, rollerblade, ride scooters. So we heard that loud and clear. Don't reduce the hardcourt area. Provide for that amenity in this park. So we took this feedback that we got, and in preparation for the next meeting in May, we came back with Concept C and D. Concept C, in both C and D, actually, we had shown and designed for a field that was going to work as either a natural turf or a synthetic turf surface, which is what's shown here. So some of the key features of Concept C, so we had shown some improved circulation. We did hear from a number of people that it is very difficult to get in and out of the park, so we've provided for that. And the result of that is that there is some reduced parking. It goes from 15 spaces to 9 in Concept C. And it does require the removal of a few trees, namely redwood at the entry and a couple of trees here along the track edge. Another component is that it takes the perimeter track that goes around the field and actually pulls it more interior to the field. And what that does is it provides for some unprogrammed lawn space. We heard that that would be a nice feature to have, just somewhere to lay on the grass or set your bags before a game, whatever the case may be. And also provided for space for a group picnic area. Some updated and improved play area. And again, the hard court that you see here is the same footprint and same size as it is today. We've just shown it with a color overlay just to make that space a little more exciting. And then in this concept, we've also shown a decomposed granite perimeter track around that field. So in summary, existing natural turf field to remain is what is being put forward as a staff recommendation this evening. Concept C does have the drop-off and turnaround. Concept D does not. 9 parking spaces, renovation of the play area, including swings, providing new swings, group picnic area, a perimeter track realignment, as I showed you on the previous slide, pulling the track in on the southeast corner, and providing repairs of the other portions of the track, regrading and so forth, providing that unprogrammed lawn space and a resurfacing of the hard court. Concept D, this one is much more similar to what you see out there today. So the limits that you see on the edge of the turf field as well as where the track is are very similar to what you see today. It's essentially the same footprint of the parking lot, 15 spaces. The hard court is in the same location, same size, same configuration. The play area is a little different in that we've shown a centralized picnic area with age-separated play, just allowing for parents to be able to supervise their children while they play. Just for the sake of comparison, we put together a matrix just to help see all 4 of the concepts together with the existing condition. A couple things to point out. As I mentioned, parking spaces is 15 spaces out there today. Concepts A and B showed at least that many or more. C and D showed the same or a reduction. Hard court size was retained in both C and D at 9,300 square feet. And the other thing to note is the tree removals. We're showing far fewer tree removals in both concept C and D. I think we were showing 4 trees being removed in concept C as opposed to 17 and 20 previously. So just taking another look at that. Some additional comments that we heard and that came out of the community meeting May 23rd. Synthetic turf really precludes dog owners from using the field like they can today. As I mentioned before, it's really not conducive to just general park use and lying on the grass. Consider upgrading with best-in-class natural turf instead of synthetic, such as like a hybrid Bermuda or some surface like that. Keep some sand play within the play area as part of the project, and incorporate the stargazers' needs. We've heard that the trees along the parking lot edge are an impediment to nighttime viewing and their activities. So we came to the Parks and Rec Commission on June the 5th, and at that meeting, the layout was voted on, and Concept C was favored by a vote of 3-1. And for turf selection, the commission was split as to selection between natural turf and synthetic turf, 2-2. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay to finish the presentation.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Good background. So the staff recommendation before you tonight, essentially, as we go forward, would be to approve Concept C as the approved park renovation concept going forward, but also to remove the conversion of the natural turf to synthetic turf from the project scope. And one of the things to point out is, as we had a lot of these community meetings, in the very first meeting, we had a few voices who were speaking out in favor of artificial turf up here at Crestview. But as the meetings went by, at both the Parks and Recreation Commission and the community meetings, we heard fewer and fewer voices that were strongly supporting or providing any support at all for the conversion to artificial turf. And much higher number of folks that were very, very clear that they wanted this to remain a park that was natural in its form and did not become kind of a one-dimensional complex, which they feared had it be converted to artificial turf, that the use would focus so much on soccer that it would exclude many other uses from being able to take advantage and enjoy the park. So as we kind of worked our way through the last several months, the absence of voices of support in any way for artificial turf at this location have really kind of helped us focus, as well as the community's input, on what our recommendation would be, and that is to remove the artificial turf from the project scope. So as we would go forward from here, we'll develop the bid docs for Concept C as the approved renovation concept, and we would look to have those completed by about January 2014, and then we'll be looking along at that during that same period of time to refine the project estimate. Because one of the things that would become obvious from this would be that if we delete the artificial turf conversion, then there's a significant project savings. And so we'll be developing the refined budget. We gave you kind of what we felt like was a pretty good figure between the just the playground and park upgrade and what the artificial turf conversion would cost. We'll have that opportunity to refine that estimate, come back to you so that you can reprogram that money, put it back in the general fund, Fund 25, and it can be used for other capital improvement projects that may be of a priority for the council or for some other priorities that you may decide. But there will be a return of that funding back to the general fund. It's not at this point currently programmed for anything else. And so we'll be looking for ways to help you spend it, but at this point, we don't have anything immediately on the radar screen to say we want you to fund this instead of the conversion. And then we'll be looking to advertise for bids in February of 2014, and we figure construction will likely start on the park renovation in the spring of 2014. So that's where we kind of go from here. So at this point, we'll take questions from council, and Dave is available, Christine or myself, or at the council's pleasure, you'll hear from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Questions? Mr. Grocott?
I just have really two questions. The one question has to do with the balance of trees, and while I can understand the desire of those who want to do stargazing to get the trees moved away from the parking area. However, the concern I would have is just the balance of trees altogether. We not too long ago did a resolution that made us a tree city, and we're looking to plant more trees, not fewer, and not to have a balance less than what we have now. So it'd be nice to see something added in terms of the balance of trees to the park, and preferably something that is more in line with the natural environment. You mentioned that a redwood is going to be removed, and that strikes me as being okay because redwoods really don't belong there. They don't operate, they don't function properly in an environment like that. But trees that do fit with that environment, it would be nice to see those added. And what comes to mind, I'm not trying to design the thing, but is even just on the perimeter towards the edge of the park, out towards the hillside as it drops down, might be a way to do it. And an impression I had, I went up to the park a couple of times recently, and I did get the impression that there aren't very many trees, and there's not very many places where you can. It tends to be a very sunny park when the sun is shining. It does, I understand, get fog and so forth like that, and a lot of wind at times. But it seemed like it was wanting of places where a person could, go and sit in the shade of a tree and enjoy that in a grass area. And then the other thought that came to mind also, and I noticed it missing as a feature and not even talked about yet. I know we've had a contingent, maybe not in this park, you haven't heard it, but for years and years and years, for about 20 years, we've had people in this town, kids who are now adults, asking for a skate park. And the only solution they've gotten really comes from the store in town that sells skateboards, and they've done a little feature out there at the, it used to be called Generations Church. I think they've changed their name again. It's over by Carlmont High School, and they put a little half-pike thing in place, and the kids are using that. But now that I have a 10-year-old, and he's, doing skating, we end up either going to Foster City, San Mateo, Menlo Park, or sometimes over to Pacifica to do any skateboarding. And I think there's a pent-up desire in this community to have something like that. I understand there's issues with insurance and things like that, but obviously other cities are doing it and managing that, and I would like to see something considered in San Carlos for that. So I guess that was a question. I'm sorry, I made a big, long speech about that. I don't know if that fits into this park, and you could say yay or nay, and, maybe go someplace else.
The skate park question? Yeah.
And the tree question, if you can address, is there a way we can have a net gain of trees rather than,
Actually, let me...
Sorry, I got into speech making instead of questions. That's right.
In the comparison matrix, we actually do show a net gain of trees in every concept that we are preparing. Can we do more? I think we probably could at the periphery of it. I would be careful not to put them in places that we're going to have planned higher activities, such as organized sports. But I think even in the concepts, like if you look at Concept C, these symbols here represent new trees, and those are clustered among a group picnic area.
Sure.
Along with this tree here, this tree here, this tree here. Those are all new trees. That's an existing tree. So really trying to blend them so that it, over time, has the look like it's been there a long time and also provides that shade that you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Very good. How about the other feature? I guess there's no room for it, or what?
I think based on, with this graphic on the screen, it's a pretty good illustration. One of the things that we've recounted from all of our meetings were in the hardcourt area that's shown there. There's a real great interest in preserving that as big as it is now for the bicycle riding, the scooter riding, and the rollerblading, and that flat area, which is a surfaced area that provides an opportunity for kids to go and play there. And really, when you kind of see other areas of the park, you start to fight with grade and hillsides in order to be able to try to find any other large area that we might develop into a skate park. So it's probably not going to be something that would fit well up here simply because of the terrain and the logistics and what's already in place.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grocott. Ms. Clapper?
Yes, thank you. I have several questions, probably going back to my Planning Commission days where I expect to get a stack about this high for a project of this size. But starting off with going back to the concept comparison matrix, which I find this very helpful. Thank you for doing this. But building on what Councilmember Grocott was talking about, so that there was a net change in trees for concept A, adding 13 trees. And for concept C, we're adding 5 trees. So why did the number of trees being added drop off to that extent?
Because in concept A, we were showing the removal of a number of pines along the southern edge, and then we were coming back and replacing them. So the amount of tree removals was higher, and the amount of tree replacement was higher. Going forward with concepts B or C and D rather, we left those areas alone. So like that grove of pines is being left alone in that instance. So that's why you see so many being removed and so many being replaced.
But there was a net increase. I noticed that there's 17 being removed, which is considerably more than the 4 of concept C. But then they're adding 30. So it seemed like for a net gain of 13 trees. So it's 8 more trees than in concept C, and it just seemed like eight more trees would be really nice. So that's why I was trying to understand why it would not be something that would be feasible to do in concept C.
I think it's something that can be pretty easily accommodated to get some more trees in there.
So there's nothing about the other spaces within the park that preclude adding more trees?
No, I look at this and I do see some opportunities for that. Don't have the answer as I stand here right now.
Okay,
but-
I just wanted to find out if there were certain things like about the size of the hard court that would preclude being able to put more trees in there. Okay. A couple of the things that I don't see here on the matrix would be such things as the number of benches and tables, and how that, what number we're going to end up with, and how that compares to what we have right now in terms of those kinds of amenities in the park.
So in terms of picnic tables, I think we have about the same shown in Concept C as there are out there today. They're just clustered together. As for benches, I think that's to be determined exactly how many there will be. I would say there would be at least as many as are out there today.
Okay.
But
So was there an interest in any of the meetings for those being, the number of benches and tables being increased as part of the area for people to be able to gather in?
Not a lot, but there were some comments related to providing for potential for maybe bench seating to take advantage of this view looking west.
Okay. Okay. And the track material in Concept C, I think it says that it would be turf or some kind of synthetic material.
We're proposing decomposed granite.
Okay, I guess in my, the one that I have here in my package for Concept C has 6-foot wide perimeter rubber running tracker or synthetic turf. Whereas on D it says perimeter DG turf and running track. So that's why I was confused, because
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm clear on what we're,
This
what we're actually
says
going to do.
Just perimeter running track, but we're in the estimate we've estimated for it as decomposed granite.
Decomposed granite is what you're proposing, okay? And then the area in the, I think it's the same on all the concepts, but the area at the top right side where it talks about the erosion control, what exactly is the scope of that part of the project?
As you know, that particular location on that hillside, there's some real erosion and some gullies. So what we're proposing there would be a combination of like an erosion control blanket, hydroseeded with like a native grass mix. So you would get grasses and plant materials to hold that slope.
Okay. And so I'm wondering how that's going to look, how that's going to be integrated in with the other planting materials on that hillside. If this is just going to be a very spot treatment, or we're going to extend it out beyond the area of the erosion so that we won't get this, funny little toupee look out there?
Right. No, that's a good point. And, what we've estimated
What's your
for-
objection to toupees?
Nothing. In the right place. I don't think here it will work.
So we would be looking to do the areas that are exhibiting erosion problems. So this is not the only location. There are a few of them along this slope, but we were not anticipating a full spraying of hydroseed on the entire face of the slope.
Okay. And was there any thought to adding shrubs or small trees along that area?
To date, it hasn't really been a part of the scope of what we've been doing. But
Okay.
no.
And one of the things to consider too, if we did that, we'd have to either install an irrigation system or figure out a way to help those plants get established on the hillside. The ones that are there have been there for quite some time, and they don't need additional irrigation either. So by using native grasses in a kind of a hydroseed, we get some of the ground cover that we need to hold that slope.
So there would be no irrigation added to make sure that that hydroseed thrives?
No, that'd be non-irrigated.
It's something that's typically timed when you have you plant it, you seed it, and then it would be timed so that the rainfall that would eventually come, the natural rainfall, would cause those seeds to sprout and that grass to grow.
Okay, I think that's being optimistic, but maybe that'll work. Okay, another area is the Leslie Drive access is something that's been identified with this park as being something to maintain, if not improve, and I haven't heard anything about that with this park. with any of these plans? What's happening with that?
At this point, that wasn't identified in the original project scope, so we really didn't spend any time on that
Okay.
with any of the concepts.
Okay, 'cause it's in the master plan, so I didn't know if there was anything to address there. Okay, those are all the questions I have at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Clapper. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, before I start, I want to thank everyone who's sent letters and emails. I've had a lot of fun reading them. I've never seen anybody or any project since I've been on the council that has generated this much correspondence, and we got a lot of ideas. And I won't go into all of them because it would take me as long to express them as it did to read them. But I did pick out a few highlights. I'm sure I'll miss things. I apologize to those whose ideas I may miss, but I just want to cover a few for the purposes of tonight. One was I noticed that the track is in every scenario. Forgetting a moment the composition of it, because I'm assuming that the decomposed granite is probably more favored than any other kind. Are there any plans to widen it? It just seemed kind of narrow to me. Or are we just going to keep it the same?
We were going to keep that the same. We understand that it's used for both jogging, walking, running, and it didn't come across to us in meetings that was something that needed to be doubled in width or anything like that.
I agree. Not that I heard it either. It was just a personal observation. Okay. Then the next question I had was, because of all the correspondence I've gotten, particularly and most of late, the people who are interested in the stargazing activities, it seems to me that at least from a parking lot standpoint, that the stargazing community really prefers the parking for Concept D. But the general recommendation is for Concept C. What I'm wondering is it possible that Concept C could accommodate the parking configuration of Concept D? Does that work?
Well, if you look at the Concept C and where the traffic turnaround is, it is actually using up a portion of the existing parking lot where it's located.
Right.
And we've determined that we really need to have that located there, because if we start to move the turnaround space to the south, then we fight the grade as it drops off away from the existing parking area now. So it would require more robust construction to try to build that grade up in order to relocate the turnaround. So we felt like lining it up and using some of the existing parking area, which is already flat, made more sense to create the turnaround that we were looking to have there.
Okay. On to the hill landscaping. Note I made when you were answering Ms. Clapper's question, you mentioned doing the grass seeding to correspond with the rainy season. What happens in the dry season? Is the grass of a variety that it would survive the dry season, or would there be some nominal irrigation of it?
No, the intent is that it would not be irrigated. It would essentially go dormant, and you would see some browning out of that grass in the summer months.
So it would brown out in the summertime and then come back in the winter?
End of April. I mean, depending on the amount of rainfall, but yeah, April, May, and then up until late November.
Okay. And nobody brought this up, but it seemed to me when I visited up there, there was a sort of a scarcity of trees along the western edge. Has there been any thought to planting several trees along that edge, along that western edge of the field? There's a slope.
You're referring to on the slope?
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of trees there now. We hadn't shown that in any of our previous concepts. I think one of the things that we have heard is that people enjoy the vista to the west. So I think if we did that, we'd want to make sure there was still some opportunities for that. But I think it's very achievable.
Okay. Not that, again, people haven't brought it up, and I'm trying to be sensitive to their needs. It was just a thought that I hadn't seen and wondered about at this point. Let's see if I missed anything. There's a monument there to Greg Nannerone and that in particular, the redwood tree that is planted next to it is, I guess, a memorial tree, and was intended to sort of accompany the monument, as I understand it. And under that scenario there, on Concept C, does that take that tree out, and does it, or what do you do in that little circle in the middle? Do you plant a new one? Do you move the monument there? What happens to that?
So the sign itself, we've shown being relocated here. I was actually not aware that tree is a memorial tree.
That's what I've been told.
Okay.
Somebody might want to independently verify it, but I don't have any reason to doubt it.
But we do show that tree being removed in Concept C.
Okay. All right. And so you'd be replacing it with same kind of tree in just a different location?
If it's a memorial tree, I think that's the least we could do.
Yeah. It's more than any other tree there, it seems to have a particular significance for quite a few people. And then the last thing is, I noticed that in almost all of these scenarios that there's a substantial, I don't know if there's substantial is a proper word, but there's a group picnic area. And I didn't, when I was up there, I don't recall seeing one. Is there not one in existence now, or is there sort of a nominal one that would this be a sort of a substantial upgrade over what exists now?
There are a couple of picnic tables out there, but they're not clustered like we've shown here. I don't know that I would call it a substantial upgrade. If it was 5 or 7 picnic tables, then you're talking about possibly dozens and dozens of people. With 3 picnic tables, I don't think you're going to see that, and I think you'll see that they'll also get double use for players dropping their bags on before a game, and so they'll kind of have a lot of purposes other than just picnic.
So there's how many now?
I think it's 2 or 3, and I'd have to confirm that. Yeah.
And the plan is for how many?
We show 3.
So not really an increase?
If it is, it's maybe 1 table.
Okay. And is there room to add more, or would there be room?
Yeah, there could be.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. A few questions here of my own, little bit of a different tack. Mr. Walter, is it possible for us, as part of this project, to put in some kind of crosswalk marking across Crestview near the entrance to the park, just because it's an issue that was surfaced to me by a number of residents that we do have a fair amount of traffic, particularly youth traffic, going back and forth across Crestview, and that marking it in some fashion to kind of remind motorists that this is a place where people cross the road pretty frequently. Is that something that could be done?
I think it's something that could be done, but one of the things that we're looking to achieve with Concept C is, as we know that there's going to be folks parking out on Crestview on both upper and lower from where Crestview Drive is, we're planning on having that sidewalk pathway kind of come into the field area along both sides of that entry point. So we'll try to minimize the amount of folks who would need to cross Crestview in order to get to the field.
Crestview is actually the street that runs, you're talking about the entrance to the park. I'm talking about the main road, Crestview.
You're talking about in here?
No, Crestview Drive itself.
I missed that completely.
Sorry, the park is named the same thing as the road, so it gets confusing.
It would be something that we could look at, but we'd want to make sure that we had a concentration of pedestrians and proper warning signs. It may be warning signs rather than crosswalks. We want to be careful with that, but it is something that we can evaluate as part of this.
Okay, I know that's something I'd be interested in seeing as part of the plan. What happens, given that we are making a relatively significant shift in the makeup of the field itself? My understanding is that historically the maintenance process is that every year, roughly during the summertime, the field is rejuvenated and allowed to go fallow for some period of time. Is that going to happen again this year, or if not, because we're already partly into the summer, how are we going to rejuvenate the field at this point?
The field has an annual process that the maintenance staff take it into. So there, in conjunction with programming that is essentially not allowed for the field areas, there's a particular maintenance period where they take the field out of use and they go through the process to kind of renovate the turf and reseed, refertilize, and do that. And that's timed essentially for the best growing season, so that would be kind of the late spring into the early summer. And so as long as this remains a natural turf field, we would have a similar type of renovation period that would be needed for it.
I'm asking a slightly different question. My understanding from talking to folks is that that maintenance cycle, which would have taken place already in 2013, or perhaps be just wrapping up, the people I spoke to at least felt that it was not done this year. Probably because of the original anticipation that the field was going to be turned into artificial turf. So perhaps my first question is, do you know if the maintenance procedure was followed for this year? And if not, how do we catch up?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
And it's something which I'm sure maintenance staff would be able to tell us. I don't have that information right at hand.
Fair enough. Let me just leave it as, if it's, and it may in fact not be the case that the cycle was missed this year. If it was, I would like to see that programmed in some fashion, just because otherwise the field will degrade more rapidly than it would otherwise. Let's see. I had a number of other questions that were driven off of the input that I know others of my colleagues have gotten from interested residents. But let me try and take a somewhat different approach to it. One could argue that what would be really nice to do would be to take Concept C, for example, and perhaps further tune it and tweak it based on another round of public input. Okay? Rather than us doing it just here from the dais tonight. So my question is, does the schedule for the way you would put this project out to bid and then construct it, do we have time to do something like that? Could you hold those kind of discussions over the summer, garner some more input, probably from many of the people who are here tonight, and fold that into whatever plan you bring back to us? Or proposal?
Well, council could obviously direct us to do that, but I'd like to believe that over the course of the last 5 months, with 4 different opportunities for public comment and input and feedback on the concepts, that we've gotten pretty darn close to what's preferred out there. Now, obviously, there will be some who will not be entirely happy with Concept C as proposed. Some will be happy with that. Some would like some additional tweaking to it. I'm just not sure at this point in time that there's that many more different ideas that would benefit the additional time taken for that. But if the council would like us to, we certainly can go back out.
So it could be accommodated in the schedule without making the project slip back if the council were to decide to give you that direction.
At this point in time, I believe it would actually cause us a delay, because what we're waiting to do is to be able to give essentially calendar the direction to go forward and begin to refine the concept with specific parts of the plans and specs, so that we can then move that towards the period to bid.
All right. What, if anything, was considered in terms of public comment involving the bleachers? And in fact, what is the plan? I don't recall offhand what the plan is for how the plan affects the bleachers.
In Concept C, there really is no impact to the bleachers. Those would remain
as is.
As is.
And to your recollection, Mr. Walter, was there any public comment input on that subject?
We were thinking about that today, and we couldn't recall that there was any significant comment about either a lack of bleachers or the location of the bleachers or the condition of the bleachers. It seemed to be one of those issues which was brought up at least one of the recent emails, but we couldn't recall it as being something that was consistent throughout the different community meetings.
Yeah, it's part of where I was saying that, to me, one can plan these kind of projects forever, and so it's a balancing act as to at what point have we garnered enough input. But it isn't necessarily surprising that, particularly when the initial impetus is to trying to initiate a change in direction from something like artificial turf to natural turf, that some of these other issues don't necessarily get the high profile in people's minds in terms of the public interaction, the community meetings. But we'll leave that for council discussion as to what kind of direction we want to give staff, if any, going forward. Let's see. I think that's enough for me for now. I would like to close, however, just by endorsing Mr. Grocot's suggestion about consideration of a skate park. I understand the logic of how it doesn't necessarily fit well with this particular park, but if unless there's an objection from the dais, it's something I wouldn't mind adding to the list of having staff come back and talk to us about at some point in time. Does anybody any objections to doing that? Okay. It is a complicated issue, as you mentioned, but it's certainly an issue that's prevalent in a lot of people's minds in town. All right. So before we go to public comment. Since, believe it or not, we actually do listen to each other sometimes, and sometimes questions spark questions. So are there any follow-up questions from the dais?
Okay.
Mr. Grocott.
Yeah, I had a few. Staying with Mr. Olbert's comments about process, this is our only chance to really have input into this project, because even if we've attended public meetings, it's not the role of the council at those meetings to throw our weight around, as it were. So if we have something we feel strongly about from the dais and want to input that without putting it back out to the public and so forth, we're okay with doing that tonight?
Your input directly to the project concept is perfectly fine tonight.
Okay. So I wanted to revisit just to make sure it was clear. The idea of more trees came up. I brought it up, and then everybody seemed to mention it. And somebody mentioned, I think it was Mr. Collins, about on the western side, and that was my impression too. Is that that's where there seems to be, if there was an opportunity to put more trees in, it might be on that downslope section. So we could possibly do that, keeping in mind that people want to keep those vistas and views, right?
Yeah.
Okay. With that idea, one of the things that also comes to mind is with the walking track, was there any concept or any comments from the community about, I'm thinking of, there's a place where you can pull off a 280, and it's adjacent to the backside of San Carlos, and it's a view, a vista. And one thing that's nice there is that there's a sidewalk that goes around, but it's sloped. It's not completely flat. And the idea is, in my mind, that at this park we might have some opportunity to keep the walking track as it is, that's flat for people who just want to do a flat walk. But some folks might want a little bit more exertion, and to be able to drop down the hill where you're talking about erosion control, and we could have a tag that goes off and goes down and comes back up. And maybe even behind the bleachers, there's an opportunity to go up the hill and back behind the bleachers and back down with something like that, and add a little interest. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
There are some additional engineering to do
Sure.
with that, cutting into the slope and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's achievable, yeah.
Okay. So maybe we could talk about that later. Decomposed granite, I was curious why that was necessarily the material chosen.
So we talked about 3 different materials through the course of the process. We talked about rubber surfacing, we talked about synthetic turf track, and we talked about decomposed granite. I don't know that we had an overwhelming majority for one or the other, but I think what we heard was that the natural setting, the DG, was maybe a better fit. Mm-hmm. And in addition, the synthetic materials tend to have a little more resiliency to them, and if you're not used to that, it's like running on something springy, right? So
Yeah.
whereas the DG, I think, is maybe a little more forgiving for that.
Okay. The reason I ask is I'm in mind of if you've ever been to a Rastadero preserve, they have a material there that's it looks like almost like a concrete walk. It's very pervious, so water can go through it very easily. It's gray, and it does seem to have a little bit of resiliency to it. so it must be rubberized to some extent. It's a very nice material that they have there from the parking lot over to the interpretation center and the restrooms. It's a nice material.
It's like an all-weather kind of surface, so it wouldn't be affected.
Yeah, but it's not like a track. It's granulated, and you can see the spaces between. It looks like it would be like it's gravel, but it's definitely not gravel. So it's a nice material. It is not decomposed granite.
I was going to say I've learned that there is a variant of decomposed granite where they put a polymer in it as well, so it has characteristics of both a resilient surface and the DG. But it sounds like something that might be worth considering.
And then my last question in follow-up is, I know there's going to be some concern about the parking area mentioned probably later in public comment, and I'm looking at this roundabout. Is there anything that says, well, I don't know how to put this. You're losing a few parking spaces, but let's face it, when these guys are up there for their activities, they're virtually the only ones in the park, and there's not going to be anybody else. So if they happen to use the roundabout for a few parking spaces, is there anything that says they can't do that?
It essentially would be designed for folks to be able to kind of pull over and drop off their kids or their equipment, for example, at the park, and then pull on out. So it's likely to have room for vehicles to pass by each other. So I suppose, yes, the physical room would be there for that to occur.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Collins?
I don't know if it falls under questions, but I'd like to just follow up on a thought of yours, Mr. Mr. Mayor. And that is this idea of having potentially another meeting. And it's occurred to me what's happened in this process is that, this renovation was passed shortly before Mr. Olbert and I took office. And it sort of percolated out there for a while. It hasn't really been a focused project. And my sense of it is what's happened is that as this project sort of became more well-defined and sort of the word got out, I realize there were public meetings, but, for lack of a better way to describe it, some people just, people are busy. They're going on with their lives. They're not paying attention until all of a sudden somebody says, do you realize what's going to happen to our park? And all of a sudden everybody starts paying attention. And by that point, this project is sort of, it's a train on the tracks, and it's kind of motoring toward a conclusion. So, given that we've gotten all these comments, and all of these, I counted, I have had over 100 emails, but they all come since March, and there's a lot of good ideas in them. I realize that it might slow the project up a little bit, but somebody's got to explain to me why this thing has to happen, on the timeline it has to happen, why it couldn't be, maybe backed up one more month. I think it would be worth it, as Mr. Olbert says, to have, maybe one more meeting and have now that we're sort of focused on a particular concept, I also believe it's true that because, the synthetic turf issue was sort of the elephant in the room for a long time, everything else was ignored. That was the main bone of contention. Now that that's off the table, it seems to me that maybe if there was a citizens advisory committee, a small group of people, I don't think you want 50 people in the room, but, the neighbors up there who use the park every day, pick their own group, maybe have another meeting and sort of flesh out some of these other issues that are of real importance to them. I'm not getting the sense of urgency unless it's explained to me why we need to, make a final decision tonight. I would like to see another opportunity. Now that people are focused on it, we've narrowed it down. We're mostly decided on concept C, but there are merits to D. There are elements of D. I mean, you've pointed out there's some things that we cannot do. But as I say, people were not paying attention. Well, they're paying attention now. I think, as I say, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think we owe it to them to at least get that last round of input now that the interest is at its peak. Thanks.
Through the Vice Mayor, if I can respond, there's really no amount of public comment or public process that we can't engage in, but you are likely talking about delaying the project by 6 months in terms of construction and operation. One thing that I would caution you and the council about doing at this point in the process is creating a specialized process or a specialized group. That seems a little bit like it could be perceived as a little disingenuous to all the people who have participated in the process to date. So I would recommend to the council that if you're going to go back out and do more public comment and more public outreach and get more input, that we do it community-wide and include everybody in the process.
I wasn't necessarily married to the concept,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'd be okay with that.
If I may, great points. Similar ones I think I'd like to hold for discussion. I do have two other specific questions to ask. Are there any other questions, Ms. Clapper?
No, I was just going to agree with you that we stick with the questions now and then get into the discussion, especially after we hear public comment,
That's
to see
fine.
where the folks who are here
And I-
stand on it.
And I didn't mean that as a criticism, Mr. Collins. It's just, the flow of the meeting. That's all.
It's fine with me.
Good. Two specific questions. One is to follow up on something which Councilwoman Clapper mentioned, which was news to me, that the master plan has in it for this park access from Leslie Drive. And if so, I guess I'm wondering why that's not part of the renovation plan. I assume it means that it's not here now. It was something that was planned to be done the next time we were going to rebuild the park.
I don't have that information for you at this point in time. I know that the project, as it was scoped back in October of 11, was essentially this group of park improvements, and then the synthetic turf conversion was added into the scope at that time, and then that project came forward. So I'm not sure even back then whether that was something that they felt needed to be considered or decided not to.
If I recall the geometry of where Leslie Drive is, I'm thinking also about Mr. Grocot's comments about possibly extending some of the, let me call it the trail system, or creating a little bit of a trail system. Could both of those issues be addressed at the same time? I think that down that slope is where Leslie Drive is it not?
The access is actually, it's a gutter pan.
Okay.
And it goes between two homes right through here.
Oh, so it's up there.
We haven't taken away access. We just have not improved it as part
Okay.
of this project.
So it might be something that we could give you direction on, saying we'd like to see it improved and made part of an expanded trail system. Okay. Last question, just about the infamous roundabout. Is it possible for the roundabout to be moved, in the context of this image, up the screen?
Which direction?
In other words, so that we actually reduce even more, take away even more of the parking spaces. But potentially what I'm getting at is that if you move it enough, does that preserve the tree? Does that preserve the potentially memorial tree? Is that something that was considered, or is it not possible for reasons that aren't apparent? They told me they couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think that's something I would want to spend a little time with that.
Thinking about it, not necessarily you want to do
Yeah.
off the cuff. Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily see something that would automatically say you couldn't do it. It's just, there might be lots of reasons why you couldn't.
My initial reaction is that it makes for a strange turning movement for someone coming
Yes.
in, making a right, and then a real quick hard left. And you'd have to move it quite a distance to avoid that tree.
Okay.
So that's my initial reaction, but again, I would want a little time to spend with that.
Well, we can potentially return to that. All right, so now, the time that everybody in the audience has been waiting for, public comment. We have, first of all, Ms. Moy, do we have any more speaker cards? Only one more? I'm surprised. Thank you. I think there may be a few more coming in, Ms. Moy.
Yeah.
And by the way, this what we normally do, folks, for those of you who haven't been to very many city council meetings, and by the way, thank you for showing up. We will give you time to fill out the cards and make sure that you have your chance to speak. Speaking of which, one of the things that we ask you to do is to recognize that everybody wants to have an opportunity to speak, and so we do ask you to try and limit your comments to 2 minutes. And in general, there's no harm with repeating or endorsing further what somebody else has said before you, but to the extent that you can keep bringing up new or additional points or additional perspectives on previously made points, that's more helpful than just repeating what somebody has said before. So with that, we'll start with, and I will apologize in advance for butchering names, We will start with Edmund Pire, followed by Jean Chacona.
Hi, thank you. My name's Edmund Perrette, and I am the outreach manager for the San Mateo County Astronomical Society. When we talk about the needs of the astronomers, I just want to bring one other aspect of that into view. And that is, first off, we've been doing these star parties. The star parties are actually a City of San Carlos function, and they appear in the city's activity guide. We're supporting them. And when we do these star parties, we do them for the public. It's a good place for the hobbyists to get together, but we basically invite the public at all our star parties. We get quite a few people. It is a real scientific educational resource for San Carlos and for the rest of the peninsula. We have star parties twice a month, weather permitting, and it's based on the moon, so I can't tell you which weekends it's going to be. They provide an opportunity for the general public to learn about astronomy and for kids to get inspired in science. We use models, analogies, et cetera, to show them and explain what's out there in space. We use our telescopes to actually let them see planets and other things in the sky. We also conduct night sky tours pointing out constellations, where the planets are, what a planet looks like in the sky with your eyes, all the things you see with your native eyes. At these events, we typically host dozens of people, sometimes hundreds, if we have a particularly good night or a scout troop coming in or something like that, which we've had. And about half of them are children, more again if it's a school group. So over the years, we've actually literally had thousands of people. So they've been going on for about 15 years. So they've been going on for a long time. And we just think that with the emphasis of STEM, of scientific education in the schools, that this is a real resource that is being used by the schools in San Carlos and other places to help inspire young minds. An awful lot of scientists, if you talk to them, professional scientists, engineers.
Mr. Pire, can I ask you to perhaps move towards wrapping up?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Children are fascinated by that, and I'll just wrap up by saying our organization's mission is education. We are a 401c3 organization because we do education. We also have several functions with the College of San Mateo. But we are, so very much, I want to point out it's not just the astronomers, it's the kids.
Thank you, Mr. Pire. Ms. Chacona, followed by Bob Daner. And I see we have Mrs. Daner joining you as well.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jean Denner, and my name is Jean Chacona. I've been a resident of San Carlos for 30 years, and I'm here to speak regarding remodeling of Crestview Park, which includes a proposed replacement of the current natural grass field with synthetic turf. Specifically, to speak concerning the petition signatures collected in favor of keeping grass. These petitions have been presented to the City Council for tonight's meeting. Our group supporting this effort has gathered signatures in favor of keeping and restoring the current grass field as has been done at Heather School to provide an improved field for all activities, including soccer. The signatures gathered represent the whole city of San Carlos, approximately 2,100 residents and 500 visitors to our city and to Crestview Park. On this map, the San Carlos streets of collected signatures are shown in orange. It has been stated by some city department members that Crestview cannot be considered a neighborhood park and that neighborhood signatures are not valid in representing the city and the park's general use. However, as well as being a community park, Crestview is also a neighborhood park shared by all families, astronomers, visitors, dogs, and soccer. And to exclude any of these would redefine solely as a sports park. Actually, tonight we've kind of over this hump. So I appreciate all your input, all your efforts. And anyway, to continue, the signed petitions have been collected door to door at hometown days and at Hot Harvest Nights Farmers Market, and represent a statement from all over San Carlos community that its citizens prefer and want to keep grass at Crestview and at other city parks. In addition, concerning Plan C as drawn up by Calendar Associates, that the final approval of Plan C be delayed for further consideration, that its hybridization with Plan D would better allow an efficiently accessible facility and accompanied with an affiliated financial analysis would ultimately be cost saving. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chacona. Thank you, Ms. Daner. Bob Daner, followed by Gene Daner.
Good evening. I'm Bob Daner. I've lived on Leslie Drive for over 35 years, and I'm a daily user of the park. First, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to the community concerns about the future of Crestview Park. The recommendations from staff before you tonight remain, in my opinion, incomplete. While the synthetic turf is deleted, there's no provision for installation of a new grass field. Crestview is a 20-year-old field that was scheduled for renovation in this budget cycle. It's beginning to deteriorate, and the drainage does need repair. The funds for the renovation remain in the budget. Should not those funds be used for a new grass field? A high-quality grass field will have the benefit of increased playing time, which is really what the soccer community wants. And in addressing Concept C, I still feel it is ill-defined. When Calendar presented these plans, they volunteered that a blended proposal using elements of each was entirely feasible. Keep the swings put in a sand area, don't remove the redwood tree for a turnaround, placement of the track, etc. And then the issue of where to store those portable goals and what to do with the bleachers is still left unaddressed. You don't want to put the goals right in the middle of a park. At the last community meeting held by Calendar, Concept C was not the overwhelming choice. The vote amongst the community was actually split 17-17. What I'm asking the council to do tonight is to direct staff to prepare a plan for the complete renovation of the park with natural grass, taking into consideration a blended proposal. What is currently in front of you, I feel, is a piecemeal approach to a project that needs better planning. Now, Crestview Park is a jewel that deserves polishing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daner. Ms. Daner? Followed by Scott McSwain.
My next.
You are up.
My name is Jean Daner. I've lived here since 1977 and walked the track at Crestview nearly every day. I am delighted that artificial turf has been removed from the recommendation for the park, but I am incredulous that the city staff has not included replacing the 20-year-old grass field with natural grass, stating in emails that they will leave it, quote, as is, and that there is, quote, no plan to spend any money on improving the natural grass at Crestview, even though 2 years ago it was, quote, deteriorating and needed drainage work. As of today, the standard summer closure for reseeding and rejuvenation has not happened. I'm up there every day. They've never fenced, they've never seeded, they've never done any of the standard closure. With UK soccer camp starting on the 15th, which is a week from today, what does this mean for playing conditions for the fall soccer season? The plans for a turnaround, which destroys the signature redwood tree and the garden around it, and is, quote, again, sorely needed by the soccer community, makes no sense. My suggestion, a 2 or 3 space dedicated drop-off zone where handicap spaces are now, and move the handicap spaces, can accomplish the same goal without damaging any park space at all. So there is an alternative to a turnaround. I sincerely hope that the council will direct staff to add replacing this 20-year-old grass field with up-to-date, hardy, high-quality natural grass as part of a comprehensive and total renovation of the park. Crestview Park can then become a facility that the city will be proud to share with the community and visitors, whether they are visiting soccer teams or guests of community residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daner. Scott McSwain, followed by Bob Wandrow, or perhaps Wardrow.
Much of what I have to say has been covered already, so I'm going to do a little editing on the fly here. Excuse me if it gets choppy. But what I would like to say is that I believe many of us, maybe all of us in this room, moved to San Carlos for what it was at the time we moved here. And it wasn't nirvana. It was never going to be nirvana, but it was close enough at the time. And I would just like to say, I hope we don't put progress in the way of keeping the charm that has always made this town a little different than many. And if we could do that, I'll be a happy guy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McSwain. I'd say your on-the-fly editing went just fine. Mr. Wardrow, followed by Harumi Maruyama.
Good evening. My name is Bob Wandrow. I've been a resident for 25 years in San Carlos and raised 3 kids, and we did play a lot of soccer up at the field. Now I don't take them up to the soccer games anymore, but I am an astronomer, and I am excited that you're considering going back and revisiting the proposals so that there's a safe area for the astronomers to meet. I don't know what the configuration should be, but something where there's no tripping, because it'll be very dark at night. But this is really a jewel place to come to in the evening, and I hope you revisit the whole issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wardrow. Ms. Moriyama, followed by Susan Blackman.
Good evening. My name is Harumi Maruyama, and I'm a San Carlos resident. I just wanted to say my 2 cents worth for the record. Nowadays, the term global warming has this country, as well as the world, concerned about carbon footprints and greenhouse gas emission. A recent April 2013 study commissioned by the San Francisco Department of the Environment showed that a natural grass field was found to have a negative carbon footprint of minus 16.9 tons of CO2 equivalent over a 10-year period, while a synthetic turf field emitted a plus 108.2 tons of CO2 equivalent over a 10-year period. And it takes the planting of 3,209 trees over a 10-year period to offset the greenhouse gas emission from plastic turf. Natural grass, on the other hand, has a CO2 sequestering effect and had a negative greenhouse gas emission. So that's creating a carbon neutral environment. Additionally, X-ray spectrometer study showed that plastic turf contained compounds of bromine, zinc, and lead, which are known to be harmful to life. Bromine is a known carcinogen and a fire retardant, which resulted in its ban from baby clothes. Bromine is toxic to aquatic life, and we all know about lead. According to this SFE study, at this time, no matter what the manufacturers claim, used plastic turf is not recyclable. Plastic turf is composed of too many different materials for recycling to be possible, and that's echoed by Recology. And costs for plastic turf replacement, disposal, transport, and landfill are not trivial, and they keep going up. I believe that the need for increased playing time or playability for the soccer players does not have to result in automatic conversion to plastic turf. Natural grass upgrades are viable options, and hopefully we will reach a more creative, responsible, long-lasting solution that is agreeable with the majority of the citizens of San Carlos, as well as the rest of its neighbors. I would like our city to reconsider the mindless trend of replacing old grass with plastic grass in the so few parks that we have in San Carlos. Also, moving forward, what
Ms.
precedent...
Maruyama, could you move to wrap up, please?
Yes. Now I conclude with a quote from Dr. Seuss and Lorax. Quote, "And now that we are all here, The word of the Lorax seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you and I care a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not, unquote. And hope we all care and do what is good and responsible for our earth. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Mariama. Susan Blackman, followed by Howie Bailey.
My name is Susan Blackman, and I've been a resident of San Carlos for 8 years. First, I want to thank City Council members Ron Collins and Karen Clapper, Mark Olbert, for taking your personal time to meet with us and hear our concerns. Your interest and willingness to listen has been thoroughly appreciated by all of us who love Crestview Park. As we know, Plans A and B created much opposition, and so C and D were introduced. It appears the council may be seriously considering implementing Plan C tonight, and that's why I'm here. In June, I attended a community feedback meeting and compared Plans C and D. The vote was split 17-17. Mark Schleiter and David Rubin of Callender Associates suggested another proposal could be a blend of both plans. They offered many good ideas which incorporated our suggestions. Nevertheless, it does look like C is being considered the final choice. This is a hot spot topic, and I urge the council to gather more information before making any decision. Renovating Crestview Park addresses many complicated issues, and I do not believe these issues have been fully examined by staff at City Hall. Plans A and B were not well thought out, and neither is Plan C. I believe we all need to step back, take a deep breath, and revisit our concerns. One of us has pointed to Highlands Park as a cautionary tale. Quote, "It has ceased to be a place for residents to gather and hang out. It is a sterile environment." Close quote. The Crestview Park Greg Navarone Memorial Park Field is 20 years old and needs to be renovated. The master park plan calls for renovation in this cycle. And yet, now that does not appear to be the case. The money has been allocated in this cycle and should be used this cycle. To leave the turf as is an open invitation for injury to anyone using the field, most especially to those who play soccer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Blackman. Howie Bailey, followed by Ken Lum.
Good evening. I'm Howie Bailey, a 35-year resident of San Carlos. I'll be very brief because you asked not to repeat those things that have been done. I'm very much in favor of natural turf, and I'm glad that it appears that we're going to have natural turf. I have one concern. I like Plan C. The turnaround adds a safety issue. No cars backing up, and cars backing up are dangerous when little kids are running around. So I like the turnaround. I really wish we could save the most beautiful tree in the park.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Lum, followed by Bob Black.
Okay, so anyway, I'm Ken Lum, and I've been a 20-year resident of San Carlos. We live at the end of Britton Avenue, near the park, actually. And I'm here just to express a couple of concerns regarding the parking lot area that we use for our stargazing and for our public outreach. One is that Plan C has a significant reduction in the parking area, which is what we primarily use for setting up our telescopes. And the second item has to do with the turnaround, which if it's constructed, I'm not sure how it's going to be constructed, but any curbs and stones and things like that can represent tripping hazards to the participants in the star parties. And so I just want to make express the recommendation that the turnaround, if it's built, to be built in a fashion that's where all the components are level with the pavement. Now, I just wanted to also read and hear how many people actually come to these star parties. We took a census over the last two sessions that we had back on Saturday, June the 29th. We had 56 people come, of which 10 10 were children and 46 were adults. And this last Saturday, on July the 6th, we had 91 people show up, actually, of which 36 were children and 55 were adults. So it is a very popular event for the city of San Carlos, and definitely an extremely valuable educational resource. So I'll pass this on to Bob Black.
Thank you, Mr. Lum. Bob Black, followed by Charlotte St. James.
Hello, Vice Mayor Olbert and members of council. I'm Bob Black. I have a set of recommendations, and I would ask that these be attached to the minutes if possible. I ask council to recognize that stargazing is a vital community, and it's even a regional use of Crestview Park. Please adapt the renovation plan to be stargazing friendly by making these accommodations. Do not reduce the size of the paved area. The current area is just about right for stargazing and to congregate and for setting up the telescopes. And I will repeat a little of what Ken said. Avoid tripping hazards. Define the drop-off and turnaround area, if you can, by flush paving, and use distinctive coloration of paving or textures to define the areas. And I think we've already won the point. Do not plant trees in the parking lot area between the parking stalls and the jogging track. I sent pictures out to everybody. You could see how we set up in the parking lot. And pave the area between the restroom and the jogging track. That's a little checkered area up there. That would give additional space to put stable place to put a telescope. And then take care of the lighting. I've listed several things in my printed copy of specific things that need to be done about the lighting. They'd be cheap and they'd be very effective to make it more stargazing friendly. Now, I urge you to adopt these recommendations or make similar changes to the Crestview Park renovation project plan to assure that Crestview Park can continue to offer safe, free, family-oriented stargazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Mr. Rubens, if I may ask a question, is it legitimate for council members to ask speakers clarifying questions?
Yes, that's appropriate.
Mr. Black, if I may ask you, I just have one additional clarifying question, and I'm using you as the representative of the astronomers here tonight, if you don't mind. I actually own several scopes myself, and well, I've never been to any of the star parties that you folks have held. Over the years, I've set the scopes up on many different kinds of surfaces. So can you please explain for me what is the problem in this particular park with setting up scopes, for example, on the athletic field itself as opposed to the parking lot?
Why not set it up on the athletic field or the turf?
Yes.
Alignment of the scope is very important. And if you're going to be able to go from one object to another with the today's computerized pointing scopes. And if you put it on soft turf, the scope is going to be shifting during the evening, and a little tiny shift just throws it way off. So we like to set up on a solid base, preferably a concrete or asphalt base.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, a couple more things I just pop in here with Bob. The other thing is we don't 100% trust the sprinklers. You've been very good at not turning them on. but if the sprinklers go on, they would destroy the scopes. And we've had it go on a couple times, it was not expected.
Yeah.
Which is another reason. And the other thing is, these things, we're talking about a lot of equipment is very heavy. We don't want to carry it very far from our cars.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And I'll just add that that the Parks and Rec maintenance and people have been just superb in controlling the sprinklers.
Thank you. Charlotte St. James, followed by Michael Maiman.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate all that you all are doing, especially those of you that met with us, and I especially appreciate all the folks who this grassroots movement that took place, No Tin and Pundit. Golly, I didn't even say that right. I imagine somebody can answer this for me, but it occurs to me that we need to have a turnaround because our athletes can't walk from the sidewalk to the playing field. And I don't understand that because it seemed to me that somebody could pull up near the entrance, you know, and then the children could walk on the sidewalk all the way to the playing field without walking on the parking lot at all, which would be very safe, even safer than getting in and out of cars. So I don't know what came to me when I heard this, my father telling me how he walked 5 miles in the snow barefooted to school, and he lived in Tampa, Florida. So that's my 2 cents. And the other thing is definitely upgrade that grass. We got 20-year-old technology out there on that field, and you know it's time. That was when that grass was put in. We all didn't have cell phones. Now we have cell phones that take movies. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. St. James. Michael Maiman, and by the way, thank you, Michael, for including a little pronunciation guide. I will. You may have to remind me when after Mr. Ryan comes up, but we will certainly accommodate that. In that case, Douglas Frazier, followed by Lo Chung Loom. Sorry, we'll get to you, sir.
Good evening, Council. My name is Douglas Fraser. I've lived here since 1977 and used that park almost every day, and have seen the things that have come and gone. Generally, I want to support what a lot of people have said here, and particularly the idea of maintaining the natural turf. And if I could just take a few seconds looking ahead to speak of the erosion issue. Part of the erosion issue is that kids use that to learn how to climb up the hill. And we have tried over the years with various projects to stop the erosion. And sad to say, I think the only thing, if we do plant something up there, will be to have to fence it for a while, because kids are attracted to that. They go up the back and then like to slide down. They like to climb up, and you could just see it being worn away. So just to tip off, if we do approve an erosion project up there, to really think about how it's going to be successful. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Lo Chung Loom, followed by Mike Ryan.
My name is Lo Chung Loom. Thank you very much for your hard working to improve St. Carlos and take your time to reading our emails and meeting with us and holding open city meeting like this. I know you have considered many conflict interests in trying to come out with the best decision you can. We have knocked many doors to get a signature for the Crestview Park petition drive since April 29, 2013. We have covered an area from the end of Britain to Alameda and beyond, from the Crestview North End to the Crestview South End. Personally, I also made Personally, I have made use of my daily walk to get a signature for 2 months. Therefore, I believe my observation is a fair representation of the whole St. Carlos. I was very surprised to find out so many unhappy St. Carlos residents for various reasons. The common theme is that the city government often does not care about what we want. Most of the residents I encountered were for nature grass in the city park. In fact, many of them could not believe the city is going to turn a city park into a plastic grass park. Many of them also expressed their concern about the wasting taxpayer money, environmental and health issue associated with this conversion. Similar to concern you've heard before, most of us generally do not pay attention to the local issue for various reasons, including me before April 29, 2013. I wonder whether or not that you can or will find a way to engage many residents with different point of view to participate at the early stage of any planning. Maybe something like a Roboco to inform residents, like PG inform us about the gas pipeline repair, or email newsletter, or link the town website to the residents so we can have better access to those issues. The modified Plan C for Crestview Park, as recommended by the city
Ms. Lum,
staff.
could I ask you to move towards wrapping
Okay,
up, please?
sure. Okay, I just want to say Plan C, I hope you consider our input for the plan modified C. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lum. Mike Ryan, followed by Michael Maiman.
Because of your 2-minute guideline, Mr. Maiman and I had divided the same talk, but as things have been covered, it's gotten shorter and shorter, so probably will take less. So I just wanted to mention that these past 2 Saturdays, our astronomers drew well over 100 people to Crestview Park, combining the thrill of learning with the novelty of a field trip to the stars. We routinely attract dozens of visitors, kids, teens, adults alike, who come with families, classes, or friends. We consider Crestview Park a unique gem, a natural oasis in the midst of the peninsula. It's easy to reach, easy to find. It's a charming location with its grass, trees, and setting. Its current horizon is nearly ideal for stargazing. The redwood tree, it does kind of obscure Scorpius, but only for about a half an hour. In the midst of suburban illumination, its skies are surprisingly dark and clear. For us, the parking lot is almost perfectly screened from light, almost a perfect size. It's flat, it's level, it's of ideal size to park and move cars, to unload, set up, and level telescopes alongside their vehicles. And they tend to weigh between 40 and 100 pounds, so that's a consideration. It's spacious and it's safe for visitors to form lines or to group together for real-time sky tours without encountering significant tripping hazards. I just want to say that I understand that many of the ideas to change Crestview come from advocates of soccer and opponents of cars, people who feel that the park would be more natural without parking on site or without as much. No one argues the value of competitive sports or healthy physical activity. No one seeks to interfere with those who walk or bike rather than drive to the park, but you just can't bring in a telescope by foot or by bike, especially when you have to go out onto Crestview Drive and hike up a hill. So please understand, we don't use Crestview as a place to practice astronomy as a personal hobby. For that, we get away from the public, to our workshops or to places with really dark skies. Our activities at Crestview are all about public outreach education in astronomy, physics, planetary sciences, and instrumentation. And with that, if I may, I'll yield to Mike Maiman.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Michael Maiman, followed by Mike Thompson.
Thanks very much. I feel like I'm kind of an alien here. I live in Belmont.
We'll hold that against you, sir.
Okay, good. I'm a relative newcomer to astronomy. I started this 25 years ago. There's this group of astronomers here. When parents show up, there's literally centuries of experience there. And many people think of astronomy as having a telescope. You don't have to go home from there and think, I don't have a telescope, I can't be part of the universe. We try to convey a lot of concepts to people. And a lot of these are used even in the College of San Mateo. If you would check with Professor Mohsen Janapur at CSM, or Michael Clare, CSM president, they support our activities and have known them for many years, and we've helped them over at CSM. I'm not going to comment on the artificial turf. That's been covered very well tonight. I would try to encourage you to have astronomy continue in full force. I think it's a real gem to have a local park where you can have sort of your view to the universe. It's very rare for an astronomy club to hold its activities on a regular basis in a community park. I'd ask just a couple of questions if I have 45 seconds left. Not to sound like I'm a know-it-all, but people come and we try to encourage them, not so much that they have to get a telescope, that seems to be the gist of astronomy, but ask, like, what's a harvest moon? where's the center of the galaxy? And we've seen toward the center of the galaxy. We can't quite see to it, but we can point to the direction, and you can see it right from Crestview Park. Why are there more stars in the summer than in the spring? And why are there more stars out in the winter than the fall? It's not that hard to grasp, and we explain that. I sometimes find it strange that kids have to know the difference between Paraguay and Uruguay, but can't identify Venus or Saturn in the sky. It's easy to do with the naked eye, and we encourage people when they leave the star party, go home, check Venus out the next day. It'll still be there, and that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayman. Mike Thompson, followed by Jeff Johansson. By the way, something I forgot to mention early on, when folks are making public comment, please make sure you address the council.
Yes, thank you very much, council members. Here we are. I just wanted to say that I'm very happy about the staff recommendation, and I do want to recognize this issue is very divisive within our community, and that it really pitted neighbor against neighbor, which was a really unfortunate side effect of this whole affair. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the underlying issue is actually not resolved. We still have a very critical shortage of field space within this town. And as much as I talked with many people throughout this entire process, and as much as I know that the city of San Carlos does not want artificial turf in our fields, we also do want a solution to the underlying problem. And a lot of energy was expended during this process to actually try to change course and arrive at the recommendation that was arrived at. But I really don't want to see other neighborhoods go through this, and we will go through it again if we don't start addressing these underlying issues. So please use this opportunity to let's get back to maybe, I think there was a 2006, 2007 study that really recommended we start expanding field space within San Carlos. And whether the solution is working with the school district to turn unused land to natural grass fields, or perhaps even purchase in the industrial area where it will support lights, that will support late night playing, that won't disturb quiet neighborhoods, or an all weather surface such as the soccer community would like in a way that's outside of our current neighborhood parks. Whatever the solution is, let's find it. We're San Carlos, we're the city of good living. Let's really start and address this, so find a solution that will make everyone happy. As happy as I am, I want everyone to be happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Jeff Johansson, followed by James Hauer.
Thank you, council members. My name is Jeff Johansson. I live at 1010 Crestview. My house backs up against the park. I just want to strongly support Concept C, and then we move forward with the plan tonight rather than delaying. I think the three main problems that people have with Concept C can easily be addressed tonight, and we can move forward and all be happy. The first one being that the grass is not upgraded. If we just say no synthetic turf, use that money, the funds that we're going to go towards synthetic turf, towards upgrading the grass, everyone's happy with the grass. The second one is the astronomy community is very against Concept C's parking structure or parking arrangement. If we just put Concept D's parking, which is not changing the parking at all and leaving it how it is, which is how they like it right now, that appeases them. And then the last question was removing the memorial and the redwood tree. If we leave it as it is, the memorial stays, the redwood tree stays, everybody's happy. We can not delay things further. We can move forward towards upgrading the park and all enjoying the upgrades faster. I think one council member asked, can we do parking D in parking C? And I think Mr. Walter was mistaken in his discussion of how the turnabout would be moved and there's a slope, and when Concept D does not have a turnabout. It maintains the parking structure as it is. I think it'd be very easy, maybe the fellow from Calendar Associates can address. Can we just do Concept C, grass, update the grass, and leave the parking as it is? Everybody's happy. We can all go home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johansson. James Hauer, followed by Dawson Crawford.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to come up and speak about this issue. I know that without soccer, it wouldn't be happening tonight. But thank you for listening to all of the greater community. And To the residents as well for opening your doors, your ears, and your minds to share with the city your thoughts, concerns, and ideas on this at times contentious initiative. We're appreciative and grateful and hopeful that reason and flexibility will yield an acceptable result we can all embrace and support. I'm not going to go over my written comments on the need for grass versus plastic because I think that that's been stated quite eloquently by others ahead of me. But I would like to say that it is consistent with the values that are expressed through inclusivity, beauty, respect for health and welfare, that we do move forward with something that's ecologically safe and sound, which would be natural. No to plastic is something that my 4-year-old son was very well versed at saying, and I think that each of the doors that we opened agreed to sign on his behalf, not necessarily on mine. But one other thing I would like to emphasize is that when we opened the door, we invited the comment of the community, and we didn't push our agenda on them, but we asked them their thoughts, and we asked them to actually make them aware that this is an issue in our city, and to, if they would like to sign on, do. And I'm happy that 2,600 did. We don't necessarily agree, and I don't agree that we should accept concept C, lock, stock, and barrel. I think that further planning and modifications could be made. It's not acceptable without revision. It's a great opportunity before us to be consistent with the needs expressed by the community, and I think that we should respect that. So we're asking for greater alignment to those expressed requirements, something that's more ecologically biased. And I think that the question on plastic or unnatural firmament rather than granite, decomposed granite, the granite is it's consistent with...
Mr. Hauer, can I ask you to move to wrap up, please?
Sure. All right. It's consistent with the plan that's being put forth by the community. So we're asking for that greater alignment. I applaud the stargazing community. And my comment would be to have no parking at all, just a flat surface, maybe 3 spots for handicapped, because those cars, whatever their shape, really do take away from the natural beauty, and it's not 20 feet that people shouldn't be able to walk up there, and if they are handicapped, we do need to respect that and have handicapped accessibility. But I would say no to the cars as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hauer. Dawson Crawford, followed by Andrew Neff.
Well, good evening. Thank you. My name is Dawson Crawford, and I am a 13-year resident of San Carlos. I live here with my wife and 3 young children, and we all enjoy the San Carlos parks. They're a wonderful part of our community. My children play soccer, Little League, and basketball, and we find that San Carlos parks are a big part of why we live here. So thank you for allowing us to address our concerns. 2 quick points, because most of them have already been addressed. First of which, I agree 100% with city staff's recommendation to delete the original recommendation of artificial turf at Crestview Park. As for proposals C and D, I understand there are positives and negatives between the two. We'll probably never get a perfect hybrid, but certainly I personally am willing to listen and provide further comment on those issues if need be. One thing that I do not want to have happen, however, is if we open this up to further community debate, that it rehashes other arguments such as turf, and we start getting into now other things that we're trying to get away from. So I would ask, if we are going to move toward further comment on this in a community forum, that it be somehow narrowly tailored in the issues that are going to be discussed. Because it could be interpreted as reopening up the whole ball of wax here on Crestview Park. Which leads me to my second and last point, is that I do think that we need to look at the bigger picture here and try to figure out a way as a community where we can acquire more playing fields. We can take this in small steps or in big steps, but we do need to acquire more playing fields for our children, because we're growing as a community, and I think the community has a need for that. But I think it's spoken loud and clear as to the type of parks we need to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Andrew Neff, followed by Nicole Belkin.
I'm Andrew Neff, live on Britton Avenue for about 15 years with my kids who learn to ride their bikes on the flat surface of Crestview. And I'm going to try not to repeat things too much because the one thing that I find curiosity is several people have labeled this a contentious issue. I haven't heard any contentious discussion at all. This seems like a pretty unanimous decision of all of the contingent here and all, as the gentleman stated, pretty much all the contingent at all the meetings, the vast majority wanted to keep the turf, or pardon me, keep the grass. So I'm so happy that that is the recommendation to the council. So looking to the future, as a member of 2 boards of directors, knowing that it's important to build a contingency where everyone gets satisfied as much as possible and you have a long-term plan. Suggestions like a long-term plan for the city parks I think is a great idea because we obviously have needs and we have a lot of different people that want different things, and developing a long-term plan is a great suggestion. One more meeting I don't think would take 6 months to just finalize the last few iterations and get it right. I think one more meeting, we could all be together in 1 month and we could get it done. I think Dawson's suggestion of keeping it restricted so we keep it maintained, but I've heard some great suggestions tonight, like the 1 crosswalk across Crestview, a couple other small things. Perhaps we do find a way to keep the tree, which I think would be, the 1 large tree would be great, and keep the parking lot for the astronomers. One last meeting to get it all right for the last time would be great. And then finally, just for the last time, particularly at this time when the city is saying we have to get rid of all plastic bags at merchants, I am so glad that we are keeping natural grass at Crestview Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neff. Nicole Belkin, followed by Nadia Haig.
Hi, I'm Nicole. So I was wondering about the loop, the extra loop. If we were to have one, wouldn't it be possible to make it more like a donut and keep the tree in the center and then be able to have the cars circle around it and be able to get out? And I've been living here for 10 years, and I know a lot of soccer players, and I know that it is not AYSO. They're remaining neutral on the Crestview Park since they don't practice, they don't play games at Crestview. But CY, I know many players, and I've heard from a lot of them, that they actually prefer natural grass if it's like the heather field. But they are not allowed to sign the petitions. They're not allowed to put any voice saying they'd rather have natural grass without being kicked off their team. Yeah, they've been told by their coaches if they say sign the petition and they find out, they will be kicked off their team. Yeah. We had a party at Highlands Park in 7th grade, the end of 7th grade, and we ran across the field not knowing that, what could happen to the artificial turf. We burned the bottoms of our feet. My friend fell completely, the skin off his leg completely gone just because he fell on the artificial grass with shorts on. It wasn't, you couldn't bring food on the grass. I've walked my dog just around the field, and he's cut the corner, and some people started yelling at me for having a dog on the field. So I think if we had a field like Heather School has a really nice field, the soccer players love it, kids love playing on it, I think it would be, really good to have a field like that here, because I think the field needs to be redone. I mean, it's really easy if you run across the field to twist your ankle or something. So I agree 100% that it needs to be redone, but I think it should be with natural grass. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Belkin. Nadia Haig, followed by Andrew Gaylor or Taylor.
Good evening. My name is Nadia Haig. I'm a San Carlos resident. I've lived here for 13 years. And I'm one of those people who Mr. Collins referred to as was fast asleep until this issue really hit me very strongly in the last 3 or 4 weeks when I learned about that there were proposed changes. I'm delighted that we're not having artificial grass. I recently put that in my own home, and it is a very poor second to natural turf. So I'm delighted that we're not doing that. I'm glad that you're thinking about the trees, but I am concerned about the trees because trees are not trees are not trees. As you have mentioned, the redwood, but those pine trees, which are on this lower end as well, are great for climbing. So even if you take them out and put new ones there, my children who are in the back, and if I might indulge you to see their posters, which they have made around keeping the park pretty much as it is, it would be great. And finally, you know, last weekend on the 6th, we happened upon a star party at the park. We'd never heard of the Astronomical Society, and we were just simply delighted. We saw Saturn with these great big telescopes, and it was simply wonderful. So I'm really hoping that you maintain the character, that you consider maintaining the character of the park, and maybe also have one of those, another review of the proposals so that we can get all these fine details right. And many people have talked about compromises which would make all the different people that use the park happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hagg. Andrew Taylor? Taylor. And that's the last card I have. Ms. Moy, if we have any others, please bring them up. No, okay.
Good evening, Council. Thank you again for your time and engagement on this issue. One thing that was, I think, discussed that I brought up the other day, that as a resident of Crestview, and it has not been addressed in the scope of this, is the importance of putting some kind of crosswalk on Crestview, because the reality is, whatever the outcome of this is, Crestview is probably going to see much higher traffic than it has now. We know that the parking is limited, and knowing how insurance pools work for municipalities, I work for a special district. You only need one event, and it's all over. And I would really urge the council to look at something, given the speedway that Crestview is, and that we know it is, that as part of this renovation, that the issue of a crosswalk connecting Crestview to Big Canyon should be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And Ms. Moy, I see we have one more. Thank you. Justin Dreymeier? Dreymeier.
Okay, so most stuff's already been covered, but just mentioning quickly that, okay, by the way, new San Carlos resident, we moved in 2 weeks ago, so.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And we live on Crestview Drive, and just wanted to echo the comment of putting a crossing across Crestview Drive. It's not too bad to cross from east to west, but going from west to east, that hill is very steep right near the park. And when I've looked out there as we were moving into the house, was thinking about things that would work well with children and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, going from west to east, there's not a lot of visibility for cars coming down that steep curve. So just re-echoing that's a good idea. And there was also the comment in terms of potentially branching like the running track. The first time that we were checking out the park, we sort of got confused with the drainage ditch and a walking track, and potentially you could even, but it mostly worked, just some trees are in the way, so potentially there's some dual use there that could be done, and would love the opportunity to see a little bit more details about the playground structure, since this is since, who knows when it's going to be redone again. And it's probably a playground that my wife and I would use for future children. And we just moved in 2 weeks ago, so we haven't had a chance to really look at the playground structure stuff in detail. So would love to see more details on that, like what pieces of equipment that would involve and stuff in future planning. So thank you.
Thank you. Unless anybody else has a desire to speak, that is the last of the speaker cards. All right, seeing none. I think, colleagues, we ought to move to discussion and try and figure out what we want to do here. If you don't mind, I was actually going to ask before we do that, offer Mr. Maltby the opportunity if you'd like to make any brief comments prior to our initiating our discussion.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Vice Mayor. One of the things that as a staff person in a municipal organization that you constantly struggle with is getting engagement from your citizenry and getting the type of feedback that we've seen with this process. Now, I've heard a number of times throughout the process that it classified by some individuals that there must be something wrong with the process because there was this overwhelming public input. And I would argue that most of the time there's something wrong with the process. This process worked perfectly. We had overwhelming public input. We had people who live in this community. This is their park. We work here. We work for them. And we want to design the park that best fits the needs, not only of the neighborhood, but the entire community. I think we heard tonight, I heard, through my staff here, a number of still competing interests. So, I don't think there's going to be, as a few speakers said, a perfect design that's going to satisfy every element of the project. Also, as we heard tonight, residents, as the process goes on, continue to get involved. And some residents who have been involved earlier on drop away having provided their feedback already. So there is a point in time where we need to sort of fish or cut bait. But as I said earlier, we're happy to go out and continue to engage the community. But one meeting with the public means 3 more meetings. It means a meeting with the public, it means a meeting with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and it means coming back to the City Council at a future date before we begin the design. The council's aware of the process that we go through. That's our public process. That's the process that we would continue to move through. So as long as everybody's expectation is that we would be delaying construction, we're happy to go out and continue to work to fine-tune with the community. So on behalf of the staff, I would definitely like to thank the residents for all their input, all their hard work that they took upon themselves through the hot harvest nights and all those things to come out, get involved in what's happening in San Carlos. I hope that your folks and your energy won't stop here. I hope it'll continue. We have a lot of other exciting issues that happen in your town. And so we look forward to your continued involvement and engagement with the process.
Thank you, Mr. Maltby. Well, let me just say that, and without trying to limit at all the discussion, but given the time and whatnot that's been expended here, I think it might be valuable for, as each of us talks, to try and outline, based on earlier questions and comments and public comments, what we would like to see, what we think the directions of staff ought to be at this point regarding this project, which could be, could be one of the many things. But to sort of focus on what's the outcome that we're looking to get. And again, I'm not trying to cut off broader discussion, but just in the interest of time and efficiency, if people have that kind of distilled perspective on what they'd like to see, I think it'd be great for people to work that into their comments. So with that having been said, Mr. Grocott, would you like to start?
Yeah, I did exactly what you were suggesting during public comment.
I could see you scribbling away there.
Yeah, I was making bullet points. So I don't know what this does to the schedule. I think we can discuss about that after we talk about our bullet points, how to process it. But what I got from the public comment and watching this tonight is we need a new field of grass. So that has to be part of the proposal. It can't be that we just leave the field as is. Number 2, we need to keep the redwood tree. I don't know how we do that. I don't know if we transplant it or leave it where it is or whatever. But when I heard Mr. Collins talk about it being part of a memorial, I wished I hadn't said what I did about it being out of context environmentally, which it is. But,
You're forgiven.
They work. So, but if it's part of a memorial, I think we need to retain it. I do think from us asking questions, it's pretty obvious we need some more trees in the balance of the plan. Number 4, we need a storage place for the goals. I heard that comment made, and I think it is unsightly the way they sit out and obscure views and so forth. So they need to be put somewhere. I would like to see additional walking track. I think the gentleman's comment about incorporating the drainage basin or swale with walking might be a way to do that. But I think it does need to be more than just a flat track as it is. And last point is we need to address, I'm not going to say a crosswalk because I hear what our Public Works Director is saying. You put in a crosswalk, you give people the false impression that it's safe to just cross the street. And we don't want to do that either. So I think the staff's recommendation on that ought to be taken into consideration, but we need something to address the crossing of Crestview, and especially as the one gentleman said, I'm impressed he's here 2 weeks and he's a resident and he's already here, but I can see what he's talking about because of the bend in the road, the curvature of the road. The west to east is the bigger issue than going from east to west, and I think that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Grocott. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. My apologies to the actual mayor who was sitting outside. I didn't mean to replace him so quickly.
Who is he?
What's his name? So as long as we're sort of condensing things, Mr. Grocott brought up a couple more things than I would bring up, which I don't disagree with in any fashion. But it comes down, I think, essentially to three things, grass, parking, and trees. I think we've settled the grass issue, although one question I would have, and you don't need to answer it tonight, Mr. City Manager, but I think we probably do need to find out what is the cost of replacing the grass. That's probably going to be part of it. I think we've heard pretty clearly that that field is no longer viable in its current conditions. In its current condition, we have to do something about the parking, and I think we can. I think we can work that out and work out the trees. I don't want to sit up here and redesign the project, but I think we're really close, and I think even though it does take 3 more meetings, I don't have a problem with that. If it does drag out the process another few months, I don't have a problem with that. Maybe other people do. I think we just need to get it right. Let's just get it right. And I think we're sort of down to the final details. I would let the community work it out with staff. Maybe we do go with maybe we eliminate the turnaround. Maybe we don't. Maybe we keep the parking lot as is. Maybe we don't. I think that there's a lot of room to resolve this. I don't think we're that far away. So I thought I had a lot more to say, but that's really what it comes down to.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. Clapper.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this is so great getting all of the input that we've gotten this evening, and so this is our 5th meeting of getting input, and I may be the outlier on this, but I'm going to say we've had enough meetings. The time now is to take all of these different ideas that we're all pulling together here and that we're going to turn around and ask staff, come back to us as a council with a plan that that does incorporate the different things that we're including. But I don't think it needs to go back for another public meeting and another Parks and Rec meeting. But that's but now I'll come up with a list of things that I'd like to see staff do, and maybe staff will disagree with me. If we're not going to renovate the field now, I'd like to specifically know what is the plan for doing that, and why are we making that decision to do it in 1 year, 2 years, rather than doing it along with everything else. If there's good reasons for it, that works well for me. I really like the parking lot with the turnaround, but I can see that from a space, the way it looks there, it looks like it's a lot of chopped up spaces, but when you compare the area with the parking lot and the turnaround to the existing plan, there's actually physically the potential for more paved area than what we have right now. But the question is, I think one person mentioned doing level pavement. How much, what is the transition between the sidewalks and the driving area? Does it need to have a curb to it? Can it be rolled? Can it be flat? I'd like to see what staff could suggest, not only for the stargazing, but just from an accessibility point of view. One of the things that was impressed on me when I met with some of you at the park was the fact that people are bringing small children in strollers. bicycles, tricycles. Is there some way that it's easier for people to be able to get across those curbs without having to do the step up and step down? So that, and if it's not divided, there is a lot of flat space still there, potentially available. So if there's some way to work that out, that would be my my dream world that I'm in. The walking path, I would like to see some other ideas besides just the straight decomposed granite, the DG, something that would be more of an all-weather surface. I'm wondering if that wouldn't be easier for us to maintain and be able to have it be useful all year round for the mix of ages that are currently using this park and will be using this park. Maybe like Councilmember Olbert mentioned, DG mixed with something, or like Councilmember Grocott mentioned, some other kind of a surface. And that's something that we had in the master plan, was to, we said, widen the perimeter walking park and convert the decomposed granite surface to an all-weather surface. It still sounds to me like a great goal. And improve the neighborhood entrance from Leslie Drive, which ties in with the idea of if there's some way to do additional trails, that's fine, but that may not fit in the scope of the budget this time around. Also in the master plan was a list to increase the number of tables and benches. And I'm kind of surprised that 3 tables would be enough. It seems like that the neighborhood might be able to use additional tables and or benches. So those are the kinds of things that I would like to see, along with the increased number of trees that were mentioned previously. Thank you. Oh, and I will just say on the memorial, on the tree and the memorial, we can ask the family for whom that is a memorial, and I don't know if we have reached out to them at this point in time to find out if they have an issue with it being replaced.
I'll see Pete tomorrow at lunch.
I was going to say I will be seeing Leslie tomorrow, so that would be the thing to do, would be to find out, because maybe it would be okay to relocate it. But I think it would be nice to at least make sure that we've taken that into consideration.
I think that'd be nice to get that input. I would just remind folks also that once memorials have been around for a while, they're not only memorials for the people being commemorated, but for the community as well. So it's a little bit more complicated.
I agree, but I think we've heard a lot of that, but I wasn't sure if we had actually heard from that family.
I'm going to be brief here because I want to move into making a suggestion for my colleagues to see if we can't move this towards closure. My list is actually remarkably similar to Mr. Grocott's. I almost thought I was sort of reading over your shoulder while you were writing. With one addition, I'd actually like to see something done to create what it sounds like is needed for the astronomy clubs, which is some more hard-packed surface. I think we may be blinding ourselves a little bit here to the notion that it has to be a parking lot. And I understand the logic that setting up a scope on an automated scope on a grass field is not a preferred thing to do, but a hard surface doesn't necessarily have to be a parking lot. And as I was listening to various public commentators speaking, I was thinking, I have a funny feeling that Mr. Walter, if asked to provide some additional space for people to set up telescopes, could probably figure out a way to do that that didn't involve having to necessarily do it in the parking lot. So that's the only addition I would make to the list that my colleague Mr. Grocott came up with.
Mr. Vice Mayor, if I might?
Yes, you may.
I just wanted to kind of make a point of clarification as you go further into your discussions and deliberations. One of the ideas that was mentioned about moving the turnaround further kind of to the north and taking up more of the parking lot space, I think from a practical standpoint, I think that's not something that we really want to consider. And the reason I say that is because if we do want to emphasize ultimately the parking area as space for the stargazers and others to be able to enjoy that activity, the closer we move that turnaround there, you're going to have cars coming in and out. And that potentially creates a problem. And I think we really don't want to mix that way. So The alignment of this really is, I think it's either a turnaround at this location or it's not, and we try to save the tree. But I think moving it to the north would really not be a very good idea as it relates to mixing with the other activities that are planned there.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Here's a suggestion I have. I was keeping notes as everybody was speaking and expressing their desired outcome. Let me run down it. I think there's actually a surprising amount of commonality amongst the things that people were talking from or talking to. And I'm going to start with Mr. Grocot's list just because that was the one listed first. Doing something about the grass field, fixing the grass field basically, a new grass field. Ms. Clapper, you had talked about, I think you said either it needed to be fixed or we needed to get a plan back and an explanation about when it was going to be fixed and why it was okay not to fix it right now. So I think that's pretty similar. I think, Mr. Collins, you echoed something similar to that. The redwood tree issue, I think, relates to keeping the redwood tree, and the memorial sounds like it actually relates to getting some input from the family as to whether or not they would have an objection to moving it. Mr. Grocott, that's a little different from what you and I had initially suggested, but if it was okay with the family, would it be acceptable to you if the plan required it to be moved?
Yeah, actually what I said was keeping the tree and having staff research whether or not it's movable.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Several people spoke about the desire to want to see more trees put in relative to what the current proposed plan is. Mr. Grocott and I had also talked about having a storage place for goals. That was not mentioned on the left side of the dais, but I didn't get the sense that there would be an objection to that.
No objection.
Additional walking track, that too, I think, was mostly Mr. Grocott and I, but I didn't hear an objection. I did hear some comments from Ms. Clapper, from you, about the desire to want to look at the material that the track is made out of to make it more of an all-weather kind of thing. There was a certain amount of commonality about doing something to mark the Crestview crossing. I wrote it as mark the Crestview crossing. I took your comments about putting in a crosswalk might not be the smartest idea, but something to make it obvious that people cross that street there. Let's see. Ms. Clapper, then after that, you had talked about wanting to do something to improve, I wrote it down as improve accessibility to the park from the parking lot. You were talking about going up and down over curbs. Did I get that wrong?
Right. Looking at it from an accessibility standpoint, strollers, bicycles,
right,
walkers, wheelchairs, how can we make that area function?
That was not mentioned by other folks, but I don't get the sense that there would be an objection to that.
No, not at all.
Okay. We talked about alternative to DG. The Leslie Drive access is something that I think when we talked about expanding the trail system is potentially also something that there was commonality about giving direction to staff on. And then the last comment, Ms. Clapper, that I think you had brought up that nobody else did was increasing the number of tables and benches.
Well, clarification on it, actually. It's not clear
Oh.
if there are more tables and benches.
I think actually there was an audience member who, when that question was asked, held up the sign for 3 tables, which I presume meant that they knew there were 3, and I think since the current proposed plan says 3, that's no change.
I was just referring to what was in the master plan and not saying that we need to increase them, but it was something that was noted at the point in time when the master plan was put together for Crestview Park.
So, in a sense, I think we actually do have a fairly unified view of the direction we'd like to give staff. I guess what I'd like to do before we see if we can come to closure on this issue is actually to get input from staff. One perspective is what we've done is we've taken everybody's wish lists and merged them together and said, here, go do this. Have we come up with something that's unachievable, likely to blow the budget out of the water?
My impression this evening was very similar to how you described it, Vice Mayor, that a lot of what's been discussed is achievable within the project, that we could move forward with the design and design those things, including the turf field. Obviously a significant budgetary element that needs to be vetted as we go through the design process, which we do in every project, of course, is the cost of the grass field. We could certainly put in provide for a couple different alternative track material that would provide an option for the time we bid the project and put it into construction. I think at this point, probably the one outstanding item that's really sort of at conflict has to do with the turnabout and how that's going to work. Now, this notion of the tree being a memorial we'll certainly look into. Today is the first time I've heard that. I'm aware that there's a plaque there, but my understanding was the tree was many years older than the plaque. So we could look into whether or not the tree is actually a memorial or whether or not a memorial was placed near the tree, which maybe would provide some feedback. But that's a fairly significant issue, and I'm not sure how we move forward with the project without resolving tonight whether or not we're going to do a roundabout or leave the parking in the current configuration or change it altogether.
Let's see if perhaps we can do that. Would there be an objection if it turns out that the tree is not part of the memorial, and if it turns out the tree cannot be moved, which I suspect, given its size, it probably can't.
No, you can't.
But I'd be happy to have it looked at. I'm not trying to prejudge it. I just was rendering an opinion. Would we be okay with giving staff the flexibility of, in those circumstances, that the tree could come down?
I'm okay with
Is that okay?
Yes, I agree.
So we would.
I want to know the options.
You want to know the options, but
Yeah.
but
I
that
mean,
would be
including the
So how do we do that? Do we hold this off until, when's our next meeting?
end of August.
End of August. We actually have. Let me come back to that in a second. Mr. Maltby, is that sufficient clarification for staff?
It is sufficient clarification. We would bring this item back to you at a future council meeting to discuss what we find in relationship essentially to the tree. Or are you trying to give us feedback that under certain circumstances we could go forward with taking
Correct.
out the tree?
Correct. And my colleagues may not agree with that, but that's what I was trying to get to. Is could we essentially give you a, pardon the pun, a decision tree?
Right.
Which says that under certain circumstances it's okay for the tree to come out.
Right, and that criteria would be that if it's a memorial and the family were okay with relocating it.
And it turns out the tree cannot, in a cost-effective fashion, be moved.
I can almost guarantee you can't move a redwood tree that big because their root base is so wide. I've seen oak trees smaller than that couldn't be moved, but we'll look into it. But
If you look into, I'm no tree expert, but my understanding is that a redwood is more of a ball root, so it doesn't go out like this. It just taproot down, and it's pretty close.
I think it's the other way around. But
is it? Maybe so, but that was my understanding. Anyways, yeah, I'd be open to what you suggested, that if it's okay with the, number one, if it's okay with the family, okay, then, yeah. I'm not the vice mayor, though. I'm not.
But that's okay.
Good evening. I'm John Fisk. I sent each of you an email in which I recommended retaining the redwood simply because, frankly, it's the best tree on the property. And this numbers game, I'm sorry, this numbers game of, well, we're adding 5 trees in this option versus 3 trees in the other option, that to me doesn't mean a darn thing. That redwood tree is the best tree you've got. And as far as moving it, forget it. You're going to kill it.
Well, I'm no tree expert.
You can't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Fisk.
Yes.
So then the question before us is, that's okay, sir, we're done. Is the council comfortable with giving that kind of contingent set of instructions to staff? Now, Mr. Collins, that would mean that it would not be coming back to council. And so if any of us wanted to come back to council.
But the whole design would come back
Oh, yes,
to council to be approved.
it's going to come back to
Right.
council before money can be spent and before contracts can be let.
That's
But there
correct.
would not be this intermediate step of bringing
We
it
don't
back.
need to micromanage the tree issue.
No.
Right.
Are you okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I'm stumbling on the tree because
Okay.
I hear what folks say, and I hear what this gentleman says. It is a very nice tree. I'd hate to see it just demolished, but I don't know.
I actually agree with you. It's a matter of trade-offs, I suppose, which everybody looks at differently. The specific question I was asking is, would you like us to insert another meeting where staff would bring back the results?
Here's where I'm leaning, is I don't necessarily want to go through the whole public process, not because I don't want to hear their input. I mean, I've heard of a lot of it tonight, and we've certainly got a lot of emails and so forth. But while I know it will delay things somewhat, I would really like to see staff respond to these items and bring it back to us. Unfortunately, we don't have another meeting until the end of August. I understand that, so we've got this break. But I would like to see this come back to us. This is, you know, it's like I was saying earlier when I was asking the questions of staff. Even if we've attended any public meetings, it's our practice as a council not to go to public meetings and give our input. Wait till it comes to the dais. It came to the dais. It's here. We have some things that we want. It's actually a very extensive list. I think the right thing to do is send it back to staff, let them come back to us with design E, and let's see what that looks like. And then we give the okay to go out to this next step.
I think that sounds like what we're all expecting.
No, well, actually, by the, I just want to be clear. I'm actually fine with what Mr. Grocott suggested. And it, by the way, as a practical matter, given the number of changes we're proposing to make, it'd probably be a good idea to have it come back one more time anyway. So, council does want this to come back, whether, you know, option E, as Mr. Grocott was referring to it. Question I have is, when could it come back? Your observation about we don't have a meeting until August is we don't have a meeting until August unless we decide to have one before then.
That's true.
So my question to staff would be, given the input we've given you and the feedback, when would you be able to come back to us?
I think at this point we'd have it back for you on your first meeting when you come back, and that's assuming that we're not going out to do more public outreach meetings.
No, that's not on the table.
Working together to put together a concept E, as the council member described it, we'd just have this on your next agenda. That should be enough time for us to do the staff work. And it wouldn't significantly delay the project.
That's key. So you're reasonably sure that that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 6 weeks at this point, as opposed to, you know, when we go public, commission, council, that's 3 or 4 months minimum to move that circle. But just coming back to the council,
fair enough,
that'd be fine.
May we revisit the tree? I just am looking for what is our others on the redwood tree.
Well, I'm a pragmatist. I love the tree. I think it ought to stay. But if it turned out that it was impossible to keep it, then we'd have to consider that. I mean, anybody ask anybody, I love trees. I have 2 huge redwoods in my backyard. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I really like the idea of the tree there. But if it comes back, if what we find out is that we just can't we can't get to where we want to be without taking out the tree and relocating the memorial and planting a new tree, well, then that's a decision that we have to make. And, you know, we have to plant a new tree. Nice thing about redwoods, they grow quickly.
Yes, they do.
They do.
Ms. Clapper?
Well, my assumption would be that if we're taking out the tree, that means we're doing the turnaround, and that means we're finding a way to make a surface that will be accessible and can be used for stargazing, and possibly with the ability of, when the stargazing is going on, to be able to not have vehicles using the turnaround, so that you have the full footprint of the paved area. So that would mean people would be parking on Crestview. So in my mind, those things are all connected together. So you give up the trees, so you have the turnaround when cars can come in, and you can use the paved area for the stargazing on the times when that's happening. If we're not going to do the turnaround and just keep the parking lot the way it is, then the tree's fine. So it depends on what staff can come up with as to which direction we go. Do we keep the parking lot the way it is, or can we make the turnaround work for everything else that we want to do there in the park.
But what's your, not to run the meeting, but when I brought it up as a discussion item is, what's your preference? Keep the tree, let the tree go, and do the turnaround? To me, that's because I agree with you, Ms. Clapper, that I was doing a little, visual on the parking area as it is now versus the graphic with the turnaround. And it actually with the turnaround, if that center of the donut is more level and somehow done with just a change in the paving or bricks or something, I don't know, to indicate that this is a turnaround, there's actually more paving area with Plan C than there is with what's there now. So,
if I may, just to put my 2 cents in, I have a little bit different perspective than Mr. Collins or Ms. Clapper, because I actually know from the plans that staff has shown us that there is a way to save the tree. It's all a question of what trade-offs we want to make. What are we willing to do? For me, to answer your question, Mr. Grocott, I would like to have the turnaround from a safety perspective, safety and access perspective, and I'd like to maintain hard surface area so that the astronomers can, utilize that. I suspect that probably indicates that the tree comes down, and for me, those other things are worth it enough that unless it causes a big problem for the family that is being commemorated there, I would be okay with it. But let me suggest that since this is going to come back from staff one more time, I have a funny feeling staff has probably sensed that we would all like you guys to find a miracle to save the tree. Right. Maybe it won't take a miracle, but let's bring it back. That's when the decision's actually going to be made.
Right.
So you're asking for a concept E and a concept F.
No,
one with the tree
no,
and one without? Is that
no,
what you're saying?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm asking them to come back with a concept, but I know that they have heard the desire that has been expressed by a number of people in the dais to save the tree if we can. And so I think that they will look at that.
Yes, but I do think we need a little more clarification here, unfortunately, because we know we can keep the tree, because we can keep the tree with the existing parking and entry configuration. That obviously keeps the tree as it exists now. We also know that we cannot put in a roundabout and keep the tree. There's not going to be a design alternative that allows us to do that in a safe, realistic way without either going way into the park to create a turnaround, right into the soccer field or the grass area, which we already know nobody wants to do that. So, we really are sort of left with, and we certainly can present it that way. Here's a plan with the existing parking and here's a plan with the turnabout, and have that be the only difference left at that point for the council to decide. But, we at the staff level recognize that this is a beautiful tree. It's kind of a signature feature of the park. We hate to cut down trees, especially, beautiful large trees like that. But we also recognize that just from an engineering standpoint, it just doesn't work. We're constrained by the entry to the park. So if we're going to put in a turnaround, we're going to take down the tree.
Well, then let's, I will lead off here just in the trying to bring this to closure. For me, the desirability of having the turnaround is significant enough that I'll amend my earlier comments and say if the tree has to go, the tree has to go. So let's hear from the rest of the dais.
I think if we look 20 years out, we can have another tree somewhere else in the park that's grown, and having the turnaround will be a great asset in this particular park. So I think it's an investment now to say we have to sacrifice one tree. Let's look at doing some other trees, and we gain the turnaround, because right now the access going in and out of that park is very uncomfortable.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Collins?
Well, I was thinking about the priorities here. I mean, the biggest priority for everybody was keeping the natural grass. The second priority was really came up to be the astronomy, and then and in order to keep the astronomy, then you have to deal with the parking. And so, much as I like trees, even I have to admit the tree kind of falls into fourth place. And so, if the tree ends up being the casualty, we can plant another tree. So as much as I'd like to keep the tree and I want to see the how we can keep it. If we can't keep it, I can live with that.
Mr. Grocott, may I suggest that, and I'll certainly give you a chance to comment. In fact, make your comment. I have the suggestion can come afterwards.
I too like the turnaround, and again, if the surfaces are treated properly, you end up with more surface for the astronomers. Give me a grove of redwoods, and I'll be happy. Meaning, don't just plant one, because redwoods don't like living by themselves anyway. So give me 3 trees someplace. We were asking for more trees. You got it solved.
We will consult with the astronomy group to make sure we don't block any key constellations or planets.
There you go.
I think if you plant the special transparent redwoods,
maybe we could put a telescope on top of one of them.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for that. We're going to move on, and actually, I'm going to suggest that after this, we take a brief break and allow folks to leave. But before people get up to leave, and I very much appreciate everybody who waited out this whole thing and people who showed up, I want to echo and enlarge upon something that Mr. Maltby said. Many people in the course of my life, and I'm sure in the course of your lives as well, have complained about how the government never listens. The process doesn't work. And I will not sit here and tell you that it always works, because I know darn well that it doesn't, just like you do. But sometimes it does. And so I would just ask you to remember the next time you're at a party or a barbecue with one of your neighbors and they're grousing about how the government doesn't work, you can say, well, mostly, but I know a time when it did. Because that's important. That's part of what makes communities work, and that's what makes them better. That's part of what makes San Carlos such a great place to live. So we'll take a 10-minute break, say. Somebody can go rouse the mayor from wherever he's hiding and bring him in.
I think he's asleep.
On the agenda is item 8B, consideration of adopting a resolution approving a strategic property acquisition reserve policy. Mr. Savay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. The proposed strategic acquisition reserve policy before you this evening is in response to the Council's 6-month strategic objectives with the goal of enhancing economic development. And the idea is that these funds can be used effectively to attract more development that is fiscally beneficial to the city and also encourage desired economic growth and activity. So why have a strategic acquisition fund in the first place? Property assembly, land use regulations, the market's ever-changing lending climate are just some of the challenges with redeveloping properties and economic development for that matter. And what we know is that cities around California are working to reinvent economic development strategies in light of the dissolution of our RDAs. There's also the desire to be able to reinvest the sales proceeds from some of the city's properties in a fiscally beneficial way. In addition to providing an effective new strategy to the city's economic development toolbox, it would add transparency for the use of these funds and help the City Council to focus on some key projects. Staff and the Economic Development Advisory Commission are recommending adoption of the Strategic Acquisition Reserve. And normally we offer you a recommendation at the end of the presentation, but in the desire for brevity this evening, I'm going to ask Jim Simon to go through the mechanics of how the Strategic Acquisition Reserve policy was developed very quickly, and then we'll be available to answer some questions of the council.
Thank you, Mr. Savay. Mr. Simon, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. The considerations that cities look at when they make these investments vary. It depends on, the local situation that you have, return on investment, public benefits, which can be a variety of things. It can be dollars, fiscal benefits to the city. It could be job benefits. It could be a variety of different things. And those are the considerations that we looked at in developing the policy. And one of the things which I think you've seen some of this before, but really looked at is where does San Carlos rank in terms of its surrounding cities, in terms of the funds that are available to operate the city. And as you can see, San Carlos represents on the lower side of the cities in the area, which even though they're comparable in general household incomes and service levels and things of that sort, say he has a lower amount of funds available to provide services. And when you start to look at that, there are items in here in the lower bars, transient occupancy taxes, retail taxes, and lease revenues. Those are things that the Strategic Property Acquisition Reserve can influence by allowing you to invest in projects that have a higher return on investment, if you will, to the city. So in other words, if the city can get involved in a project that otherwise couldn't happen because you need to consolidate lots to get a size of property large enough, that might allow you to get a particular revenue type of generating use, such as some of those that we've illustrated here. Hotels tend to stand out the most, as you know, because the city collects an overwhelmingly much larger share of taxes from the same piece of property. And then when you start to look at this is how the Strategic Acquisition Reserve would work in practice, is that it's essentially raising the bar, if you will, of the amount of funds that the city has available to provide services by creating more revenues to the city through this kind of economic development investment. So the policy that you have in front of you really contains two primary components. One is a series of 8 priorities that you see that we've outlined here, as well as implementation considerations that would be adopted as part of this action. The first on the policies, the idea is that before any projects are considered to be using these funds, these $4.5 million that you have today, or as it may change in the future, they have to be vetted and screened through these considerations, which are largely fiscal benefits, return on that investment, other non-fiscal community benefits, public facilities, public parks that may result from the project, revitalization of commercial districts, things of that sort. The other thing that we've looked at here is how does this actually get implemented?
And the first step is to make sure it's consistent with, in this case, the economic development plan, because there's obviously an emphasis of economic development in this initiative, as well as to then use these priorities to pursue initiatives, and perhaps most importantly, not look at this as a one-time investment. This policy is intended to create a fund that does get replenished, perhaps not in every single instance, but in general state that that's the intent and desire of the City Council to make sure that that happens. So that basically outlines for you what the policy is. It's fairly simple. It's intended to be such, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions for staff or Mr. Simon? Mr. Grocott?
Yes, I do have a question. When I look through what's being recommended, I don't see how we address one item that my understanding is when we put money into this fund was a key earmark, and I don't see it addressed in this strategic property acquisition policy as it's presented to us. And that is, for instance, when the city decided to sell the land that is now In-N-Out Burger, number one, that was a very big decision for the council, because for years and years it was sort of an unwritten policy of the council to never sell any land that the city owned. However, at the time when we made the decision to go ahead and not do a land lease, primarily because the developers of In-N-Out didn't want to do a land lease, and we wanted to see something happen out there, we sort of gave in, or had new thought, if you will, about whether or not to sell land, and we decided to sell it. At the time, I remember we had Brad Lewis on the council, and one of his concerns, especially coming from the Parks and Rec Commission, was that we set the money aside, number one, in an account and not allow it to fall into the general fund, and number two, that we begin looking at opportunities to acquire additional parkland. And I don't see anything in here that addresses that concern.
Through the Vice Mayor, if I may.
No,
That was
the
actually, I'm sorry, the Mayor's back. Through the Mayor. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
How soon they forget.
Right, yeah. You're so quiet up there since you came back.
Excuse me, Mr. Maltby. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Councilmember Grocott, that was actually specifically why we created item number 8 up there, in recognition. Now, my recollection was that the council was very specific at the time of the In-N-Out sale that money not be put into the general fund. But there were a lot of different people on the council that had a lot of sort of different ideas about how we might spend the money, and the council never really, because there wasn't a proposal in front of the council never coalesced on what they would consider to do with that money, and so we wanted to recognize that certainly that's a perspective on the council, that money could be used for parks or public facilities or something other than economic development. And so we thought we were making that clear in a couple areas up there, but primarily item number 8, that you could, that would be one of the uses for this particular money down the road for a council to consider.
Okay.
Other questions? Mr. Olbert?
Yeah, I'm just segueing off of what Mr. Grocott was talking about, because it's actually similar to a conversation Mr. Maltby and I had earlier today about that same point. I wonder whether or not what we could do here is either move number 8 up in the priority queue, or at least recognize that investments that fall under 8 are likely to be a little bit different. I mean, for example, consider a park. If you were to use the money for something like that, you're not planning on turning that over, right? You're not going to build a park and then sell it to somebody. No. So that's an actual permanent allocation of funds there. So it's qualitatively a little bit different. I'm actually okay with this hierarchy, but if we wanted to, we could move number 8 up, or we could change the definition of even something like number 2 to recognize that return on investment isn't always just fiscal returns. It's quality of life returns, something like that, as well.
Yeah, I don't think the staff would have any issue in reordering these. I don't necessarily think we were putting these in priority order when we put them up there. And one other suggestion that I was going to make when I was speaking just a moment ago is you might just add parks specifically in the parentheses in number 8 where it says public facilities or infrastructure. Maybe we actually say parks specifically there.
Other comments? Ms. Clapper? Mr. Collins?
No, I would be fine with making that change to 8, but my understanding of this policy is really looking at it from an economic development point of view with the loss of the RDA.
Okay. Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Well, I guess we can have a motion.
Yeah. Then we can have, I'll hesitate for discussion. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I move the council adopt resolution number 2013-80. Resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving a strategic property acquisition reserve policy with the amendment of modifying priority number 8 to reference parks in the parenthetical public facility or infrastructure.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's moved in second. Discussion, Mr. Grocott?
I'm struggling with this a lot because, like I said, I remember very vividly the discussion we had when we made the sale, and with Mr. Lewis particularly on the council, there was a lot of discussion about using this money for additional parkland. We've been told for years that we need additional parkland. We heard tonight from people we need additional parkland. And the problem I have with this policy is, I could go into the philosophical aspects of it. I really struggle with the idea of, fundamentally government is here to provide service to the residents and businesses and so forth. And fundamentally, those services are paid for. If they're general services, they're paid through taxes, and if they are specific services, they're paid for by fees, both of which the public has some kind of handle on. And I think what's happened here, unfortunately, is there's this recognition that, yes, that's how revenue comes to the city, so we need to grease the skids, so to speak, to make that happen in a more aggressive way. And so we're going to do strategic planning and property acquisition. As Ms. Clapper said, we're going to replace the redevelopment agency. But quite frankly, I look at what has happened with government's involvement in trying to do redevelopment, at least in this town, and it's, you have to admit that the worst looking residential building in San Carlos is an apartment building that we own. And the only blight that exists in this town now, or the greatest blight, is in our own downtown because we own it. And I understand there's a lot of factors involved on why all that happened, but those are the facts. And so from my perspective in that, we fail at that. And so I approach it from, we should just let the market do, within reason what the market's going to do, and we will benefit. We've already seen good things happen, for instance, in San Carlos with property values. They keep going up. We have a very good, strong, property value increase going on in San Carlos in the residential market, and we benefit from that. Specifically to this, what I see here is an army of 7 items up against 1 item that is for parks. And to add it, I appreciate what you did, Mr. Olbert, but to add something parenthetically, that's just not how I saw this fund when we put $1.5 million into it. It's only $4.5 million. There's not a heck of a lot you're going to be able to do with it in terms of these 7 items, but there is a whole heck of a lot you could do with it in terms of if you focused on Parks and Recreation. And so I just really struggle with, we're going to give this direction to staff, and I'm afraid this money predominantly is going to be used for items 1 through 7 and only looked at parenthetically item 8. And that's what I fear.
You know, you and I were, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt. You and I were the only ones on the council at the time, and I remember the discussion, and I tend to remember it as Mr. Maltby did, that certainly Mr. Lewis was in that area, but there wasn't a specific, there was a feeling to do it that way. But there wasn't, I don't remember a specific vote that we were going to identify, but I may be wrong. I have a CRS sometimes. But the other part that does happen, and again, times do change. In those days, and it was over 4 years ago, because Mr. Lewis has been off for 4 years, we had a different environment in redevelopment agency. We had other funds. We had this, that, and the other. It's a different day today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this policy gives us some, it's there. I mean, I know it may be 8. I don't necessarily agree with the priority either, but we can all have 8 different numbers how we want to do it. But at least it's there. And if the council wants to use those funds for that, if an opportunity comes up, I'll be the first one to try to look at it. But I think this gives us a lot of flexibility economically, which we need, and also on the park side if we need it too. So, you and I voted the other day on a certain way, and we lost. But on this one, I have to disagree with you. I think this policy gives us flexibility, and that's what we need. If we just make this for parks, we're limiting ourselves. I mean, we're almost doing the same thing that you and I voted against the other day. We're putting this limit on this, and we're not going to be able to have any flexibility on it. So I think it's a good idea. So anyway, Mr. Goldberg, going here.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually ask if it's possible to amend my motion.
You can amend your motion.
Okay. I suspect that this won't address a significant extra portion of the concern you expressed, Mr. Grocott, but I'd actually be fine with implementing what Mr. Maltby said and delete the priority column reference.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And just say these are the things we want considered.
Right.
They're just bullet points.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's a good idea. Does the seconder agree with the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? Mr. Collins?
Yeah, I just, a couple things came to mind in response to Mr. Grocott's comments. And first of all, park funds they can come from commercial development. When this money is invested in projects that bring commercial development, we can ask the developers to contribute a certain amount to our parks fund. That's happening with the Transit Village. The other idea I had is that maybe we could talk about designating a certain percentage of this money toward parks. I don't know what the percentage is. We'd have to figure it out. But is there any restriction against doing that kind of thing?
Well, there's no restriction, first of all, against doing that kind of thing. The problem that you run into with doing that kind of thing is that you can't bind future councils. So really we were trying to create a policy that just provided the maximum flexibility, because the future council is going to have that flexibility regardless of what you do with this funding. This funding isn't legally restricted. It's restricted because the council has put restrictions on it that they don't want to see it just be dumped into the general fund and spent on normal general fund expenditures. So what we're trying to do is create this broad policy that allows a council in the future, this one or another one, to take action utilizing this revenue in a way that's consistent with a lot of different possibilities.
Okay, well that makes sense. There could be an opportunity without any sort of priority or designation or percentage designation where the staff might come to us and say, here's some parkland that we might want to buy.
Correct.
That's correct, yeah. All right, so call the question. So roll call, please, on the amended motion with no priority.
Correct. Councilmember Clapper?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Silly?
Yes. I'd also entertain a motion now to extend the meeting, please.
Mr. Mayor, move that we extend the meeting to 10:45.
Is there a second?
Yes. I'll
All
second.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 8C. Consideration of adopting a resolution approving an agreement for compensation to the County of San Mateo for collection of special charges and approving the placement of sidewalk repair charges on the property tax roll pursuant to Section 12.04.030 of the San Carlos Municipal Code. You have a very short presentation, correct?
Yes.
And the first time you've before me, and I'm already limiting what you're going to say.
I actually don't think that was a question on your part. It was more of an assertion.
Oh, that was a question.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the Commission. I bring to you the sidewalk program. I was hoping that the community would be here as I did my presentation, because I do better in crowds, but unfortunately, my hopes were dashed. Being respectful of everybody's time, I'm going to try to make this quick. The sidewalk program itself is a service that the city provides to the residents as a large-scale improvement to help them utilize economies of scale to provide a more efficient and less expensive method for them to repair their sidewalks. It's a service that we provide. For the property owners, what we do is we actually notify the property owners of the trip hazards and sidewalks in front of their property that needs repairs. And for homeowners, that could be a daunting task. So what we do is we offer them the ability to attach on to our sidewalk program and utilize our city contract to fix their sidewalks. And what we do is after we do those repairs, if they decide to opt in, we actually bill the homeowners at cost for whatever the contractor charges us. The city actually absorbs the administrative cost for this. After that work is done, we try to attempt to bill the homeowner with the first bill. If they do not respond, we send a second courtesy bill to them. And if they don't respond to that second courtesy bill, we then send a notification to the owner that their account is past due and that they'll be brought before the council to be put on as a special charge to the property tax roll. With that said, this year we did 152 locations. And we went through that process and we essentially came down to 22 locations that are currently unpaid as of 5 p.m. today. And we are recommending that those be placed on the tax roll to collect the revenue for this fiscal year. Okay. With that said, are there any questions?
Questions?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the brief and informative presentation. Just one quick question. So something I didn't understand prior to your presentation. It sounds like the procedure always has been ultimately to put it on as a tax lien.
Yes. If
And so effectively what's before us tonight is to formalize that process or to not
approve these
formalize it.
cases.
Just to actually do it for this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You have to
So
take
it's not a
action every
change
year.
of process. It's simply an implementation of the process.
Yes.
I didn't understand that. Now I do. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, as a follow-up to Councilman Olbert's question, then why are there 4 of these that the project year is previous? Did we do the work and just kind of miss the last cycle when it was approved to go on the?
I believe the 4 that were from previous years, I think in previous years have not put that on the tax cycle, and so as a cleanup act, we are doing that for this year.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't ever remember putting it on the tax cycle ever. So unless it
It's
was.
been a number of years since we've had to.
Okay.
Typically, they all
okay.
get paid, and I think that's what happened with the 4. I think we were continuing to try to work and send notices to get payments so that we.
I'm just surprised that when folks apparently opt into the program and then don't pay, I'm very concerned. But it is what it is.
Do they necessarily opt in, though? I mean,
Well, that's
Yes,
what
they
those-
do. They choose to opt in or
They
do
opt
it with
in.
their own forces.
So I do have one question.
Sure.
Of the 22 who aren't paying, do we know anything about these folks at all and their situation? Are they? And the reason I ask the question is, I always come back to this when you've got people who are on a fixed income and they're elderly and they can't afford things necessarily, and maybe they opted in, not realizing how this gets done. I don't know. Do we know?
For these 22 locations, these are typically ones where we get no responses. If we do get a response from property owners, we do work with them to get their bill paid.
Yeah.
And we do work with the property owners. So for these 22 locations, there was essentially no response after our second billing and our notification to them.
Which, just to follow up on that, I for instance, I have some friends who have an elderly mother living in town, and and they try as much as they can to help manage the property. She insists on living there and not moving into, a care facility. But it does, these kind of things can get difficult. Things get lost and fall through the cracks and so forth. So I don't know. I guess you can't manage them all, but there is I have a heart for that.
Yeah, we do understand that. I think putting it on tax roll is not our attempt to be punitive at it. It's just for us to collect the funds for work that we've done for the residents as a special service.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, could we have a motion?
Yes, I move that we adopt resolution number
81.
2013-81, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving an agreement for compensation to the County of San Mateo for collection of special charges and approving the placement of sidewalk repair charges on the property tax roll pursuant to Section 12.04.030 of the San Carlos Municipal Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, can I just make one comment?
Certainly.
Just, part of the code is to, and why this is before you tonight, is so that the public whose properties will go on the tax code have an opportunity to come before the council
sorry,
and state reasons why.
Sure.
And just for the record, there's no one here tonight.
No, but you're right. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this item? Your point is well taken. Okay. Seeing none, then roll call, please.
Councilmember Clapper?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't cut you off next time. Well, maybe not. Thank you. 8D, and Ms. Clapper?
Yes, I will be recusing myself since I live close enough to a section of the road under consideration on this item.
Okay.
So she gets to go home early.
Well, she can if she wants, and it's her choice.
Well, I'm not going to leave.
She's not
just
gonna
in
do
case
that,
there's
though.
a surprise.
Okay, do we have a staff report on this?
We do have a staff report. We don't have a presentation for the council. Typically, the annual street resurfacing project is fairly routine business unless the council has any specific questions.
Okay.
This item would have appeared on the consent calendar had we not known that we had a council member who was going to
Understand.
need to be recused from the item, which is why we put it on the business calendar. If you have any specific questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for staff? Go ahead.
Thank you. It looks like it's that portion of Crestview that goes up by, from Melody up to Club. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it looks like it ends at Club. Has there been any feedback from the community over a stop sign there or crosswalks at Club and Crestview? I've talked to people.
There's been
time to
discussion.
time.
It's been through TNC. Club in Crestview is currently being reviewed by the police department. It will go back to TNC. So there is a proposal working its way through the process that may result in a stop sign or some other striping improvements at that intersection.
All right. Yeah, because I don't know about anybody else, but I've heard from people in the area that are really concerned about that particular intersection.
I just had one quick question, Mr. Walter. I assume that the reason we're not going all the way to the border is because we don't have the funds aren't there? Or it probably doesn't need, because it doesn't get that much use?
That's correct.
Because there is not much traffic, because it does stop at the border.
That's right. So
Okay.
this essentially is kind of the end of that arterial piece.
Right.
The rest of it is more like a cul-de-sac. So the grant money was applicable to that arterial piece.
Okay, and plus the fact that I'm sure that part of the street is very much better off because it's not used as much either.
It's actually not. It's got some distress, and so it's something that we'll keep in mind. But with this particular grant, we're able to do the work that's on the arterial portion.
Great.
So we can't accidentally have a paving machine go through
Yeah, I don't
the
know why I
barrier
can't
and-
accidentally go a little farther, but anyway. Work on that way. Could I have a motion for this, please?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the council adopt resolution number 2013-82.
Correct.
Adopt a resolution approving the Crestview Drive pavement rehabilitation Phase 2 project C9416 plans and specifications, authorizing the advertisement for bids, authorizing the expenditure of a construction budget with contingencies, and executing a construction contract with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder if the bid is within the construction budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Vasili?
Yes. Ms. Clapper? We through the door? Seeing nothing more on the agenda, I would like to adjourn this meeting in, not memory per se, I guess that's not the right word, but in the thought of the folks on the Asiana airliner and all the first responders and all the folks that were involved in that situation. That the city is thinking of all the people there that were involved in that. So that's how I'd like to adjourn the meeting. So, adjourn.